So today is April 11th, 2024. It is 4:05 p.m. and we are calling the meeting to order. We will start off with public comment. Is there anyone with public comment? Oh, Jenny has her hand up.
You don't have anybody else, right? I just wanted to say thanks to Dan for the complete description of what's going on. And I mean, I still have questions, but but it was good to read that. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and I mean that's my intention is to be more transparent with the public. So what I would like to do is do a board update prior to a meeting, hopefully a little more advanced than what I did. And then maybe something after the meeting to kind of either clarify or talk about the main points discussed, something like that. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Great.
But I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jenny.
Sure.
We got two hands up on Zoom. First, I see coming. I don't know if that's Russ or Joyce.
It's Russ. I just wanted to compliment the person who prepared the agenda for today's meeting. It's an excellent example of how an agenda should look. It has highlights on there that can be linked to information that's going to be discussed. And it has the time elements in there as well. So it's a very well done job. And if Rory did that, you did a great job.
That was, I believe, Daniel. So thank you. I agree, Russ. Thank you for the kind words. Daniel, fabulous job.
Yeah, I appreciate the compliment. Yeah, and it follows what we talked about in our reorg. You were there. Yeah.
Yep, way to go. Kathy Edgerly.
There, thank you. Echo that, what Russ said. And also, I would just like to put in a request to you all and to everyone that could we buy ourselves some time to do some planning and to work with the town on a community needs assessment, which probably won't be able to happen until, I would imagine, at the earliest, maybe June. But we have lined up some potential money and it would take some patience, but I think at the end it would be so worth it. So I put in a request for getting this budget so that we can buy some time before the deciding what to do with this building. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
Appreciate it, Kathy. And we have a lot that we'll discuss today about kind of where we're at and future plans and all the options available to us. So yeah, appreciate your comments, Kathy.
Okay. Anybody else for public comment? Don't see any other hands up and nobody else here in the audience. So we'll move on to changes to the agenda. So as has been pointed out, the timeline, the board does not have a desire to be here until 8 p.m. tonight. So the start time is correct. The times of the other pieces on for speak, Abby, old business, new business, and adjournment will be, if you could take away 2 hours from each slot. I think that would be a more appropriate timeline. Is that agreed with everyone?
That would be great.
Okay, so we'll have those changes made. Is there any other changes to the agenda that anyone would like to add or change?
Abby, I don't have a change to the agenda, but you do have a few people in the Zoom who are not identified. One's an iPad, one's a phone number, and I don't know if your new minute taker will need to know those.
Oh, yes, we definitely will. That's a good point. So iPad 2?
Tom Lee Ricker.
Okay. And
Is that Frank Seawright? I just see Frank. And Frank, you're on mute. I just see Frank under Aaron Kehoe. Yeah. Well, we'll circle back with you, Frank, once. Oh, you're on mute.
whoops, I just didn't mean to do that.
596.
There, okay. So do we, Frank, we need to clarify if that is Frank Seawright. So, please unmute yourself and comment.
We can circle back if we need to.
You also have a
Now,
508 phone number.
Oh, somebody else was speaking.
Frank, maybe unmuted.
Okay, the 508 phone number, as Bob just mentioned, could you identify yourself, please? Frank, you are unmuted. So if you're able, Frank Seawright, you changed it. Thank you very much, sir. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Excellent. Thank you, Frank.
Perfect, thank you.
It is also Nancy Tips here.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, so that will be, we'll make sure you're both added, okay? We're still looking for the 508 phone number? Area code 508? Okay, as the host, Bob, since we can't identify the 508 number, I don't know if we're not able to do that, are we gonna remove them?
We can. I'm going to push the ask to unmute button first and see if that makes they get a little prompting. Maybe it'll tell them how to unmute, because phones, they have to do a different code to unmute.
Correct.
Star 7 or something like that.
Oh, I'm getting an email from B. Yeah, I just got your email, B.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah,
Okay,
no problem.
perfect.
I don't know how to do myself again, so do you mind muting me?
Bob, thank you, Bob. Okay, so we've got those people identified. We've named the changes to the agenda, so we are moving on to correspondence. Daniel, would you like to kind of take over the correspondence and talk about?
Yeah, so we have two correspondents, one from Russ and one from Crystal. And with Russ's in particular, I think we should do something a little different here. I'd really like to understand his stance when it comes to documents that he sent either to Lori Garland or to others within the community. I'd like to take some time here to really understand exactly where he's coming from, exactly how it impacts our budget, have that discussion right with him, have him field questions from the district, perhaps from the public as well, and then we discuss, and perhaps there will be action towards the budget when that occurs.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
Now, Russ, I see that your hand is up.
And we can do that when you get to discuss the budget, which is under old business, the last item on old business.
Well, I think that this was regarding the correspondence, so I think we're also looking at this particular piece with what you had brought up in correspondence, or are you comfortable with that?
I think there's going to be a lot more discussion, than just Russ, but I'd like to carve out time right now. If Russ is game for it.
I'm game. I'm game for it.
Okay, then that'd be great.
Okay. So.
Well, Russ, I want to give you the floor. Yeah, kind of go over your correspondence, go over your methodology.
I don't think other people on the call here have seen the correspondence that I sent out, which was a proposed change to the budget that has been offered for consideration tonight. And there are several points in it that I think need to be discussed and considered. And the first one is, rather than using 22 students, we use 20 students. And the reason behind that is, further on in your agenda items, you've created a tuition reserve account. My point in bringing up additional students when this was originally discussed was I didn't know that there was a $95,000, and I say anticipated surplus from the 2022 budget, because nothing has been published and it's just been in conversations with various people that number came up. So there's no point in continuing to have 22 students for counting And that'll save $36,684 out of the budget because you've allowed for that with a $50,000 surplus account for tuitioning. The second item that should be removed is the $6,000 for legal fees. I think that if we were to put in $1,500 or $2,000 for legal fees, that would be more than adequate. I see that Mr. Ottinger had charged $1,900 and some odd dollars for his conversation with the board about the petition that we had submitted. But I think a $2,000 legal fees would be reasonable. And I also think we should remove the $5,000 stipend for parent transportation because I suggested that at the last meeting because of my familiarity with the way Stratton had been treating the stipend budgets. But we subsequently learned afterwards that Lori indicated that they're no longer doing that. So I think the parents that are currently bringing their students to a school that is not served by the bus would still be willing to do so. And I don't think that $5,000 stipend needs to be included. The fourth item is to remove the $48,491 for the operation of the building. Now, I concede that if the building is owned by the school district, it should be insured, it should have heat, and it should have electricity. But the rest of the charges in that line item, I don't think are necessary. And as indicated in your budget that you're proposing, you're talking about the future of the building. If the future of the building is going to be continued to be on an educational service, you're going to need to sink several hundreds of thousands of dollars of repair and maintenance into the building. And I think that's unwise. I think there are other uses for the building. If it were transferred to the town, those costs would be borne by the municipal tax rate, which would be divided across the entire tax-paying base, both the homestead and non-homestead taxpayers. Keeping that $48,000 in the budget means that only those individuals who file a homestead return are going to be paying that portion, that money to keep the building open. And I think it's much wiser to turn the building over to the town and have the town then allow residents to use for various purposes unless there's another choice for it. And as Kathy Edgerly has said, she'd like to see other studies done to determine its highest and best use, which I think taking time to do that would make sense. So if you look at the budget of $579,344 and you remove $36,684, which is the two additional tuition students, $6,000 for legal, $5,000 for transportation, $48,491 for the building, and then deduct the $19,400, which is the transportation stipend coming from the West River District and from the state, you would remove $115,000 from the $579,000, which would leave a net to be raised by taxes at $463,796. And the long-term weighted average daily membership, which is set in stone according to Lori, is 33.77. So when you divide the 33.77 into the amount of money need to be raised by taxes, you get a cost per student of $13,773. And then the yield this year is basically saying that for every $9,775 of assessed value, you generate $1 of tax. So you divide the $9,775 into the $13,773, and you get 1.409 as what I call the raw tax rate. So then you go back to the form that Lori submits to determine what the tax rate is for Windham and for the West River District. We have 64.42 students represented by Windham in the elementary, which means 64.42% of $1.40 is going to be 90 cents. We have 35.56% are middle or high school students, and the West River tax rate from that last sheet on the budget is 57 cents. So you add the 57 cents and the 90.7 cents, and you get $1.48 as the tax rate, which is a significant savings over what the estimated tax rate would be using the proposed $579,000 that you have in the budget. I think it makes sense. It's a business decision. I know that the audit has not been finalized, at least from my last conversation with people from the West River District. But it's estimated to be 95,000, and there's also possibly a surplus from this year's operating budget, which could be used to fund a deficit that I think Lori referred to in a previous conversation the school board had. And I believe the revised budget that I'm suggesting here makes common sense. It makes business sense. It reduces the amount of money that has to be raised by taxes. It provides for educating all of the students for tuition, and it eliminates unnecessary expenses. Questions?
Yeah.
Go for it.
I guess I'll start. I'm glad you acknowledged the surplus assumption. I mean, there's other assumptions I definitely want to get to in your document. So starting with the 22 students, well, let's start with when we talked about this, right? We talked about it on the floor, right? You were a part of that conversation, along with the stipend, the amount of students, right? What I echoed, right, and what I heard from Lori is let's take a conservative approach, right? Because we don't know how many students. For instance, if you look in the agenda, we have an article for independent student school tuition that could bring a number of students into the fold, right? Could be past 22 students. I know of please, sir. I know of a couple of other families, right, that I've had feedback from that are also would have been at Windham this next coming year, if not for the fact that we closed, right? They're going to bring into the fold. And so generally, I want to challenge assumptions because you're working with the best information you can, but we're getting feedback, right, from parents. We're getting feedback from the SU directly, and you're kind of getting hand-down information, right, about the surplus, how many students, the legal fees, stipend, this and that, right? And so that's really what I want to talk about is, how do you justify, especially when we see in new business, right, we could possibly add an article and it could be voted in. And, what you're suggesting is that we use the surplus, that could blow up our surplus, right? It could create tomorrow tax dilemmas that today we may not suffer, but tomorrow we will.
I don't understand what you're referring to as new students coming into the system. I'm not aware of any families that are currently homeschooling that would all of a sudden decide to tuition their kids to another school, either public or private.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to clarify. So there are independent schools, right, that were not covered, right, originally in the articles warned, right, for public choice. But now, if we were to include this new article and it got voted in, those students would now be in the fold of the SU funds and how we distribute it and the LT, the long-term weighted ADM that you discussed.
Well, I don't disagree with that, but there are 15 students in the school. 5 of them are going to other schools at this time, which is a total of 20. And I know of no other families in town that are either homeschooling or sending their kids to the mountain school that would be eligible to get tuition for this next year.
Exactly. And that's exactly what I want to bring up. Exactly. So I am aware of it, right? The district is. And that's really the crux of this, right? Is the district has information that the public at times doesn't have, right? And to put out a list of assumptions, right, that would, 1, challenge our budget, but 2, take these budget items out. But from your stance, right, just going forward, what happens in FY26, Like, will those budget items come back? I can tell you the statistics around it is that there's a low likelihood that these would ever be back into the budget. And not only that, but based on your assumptions, right, we would blow past the surplus. We would create a deficit situation. And in that deficit situation, we wouldn't have a surplus to, like, essentially we would burn it out, right?
It's a matter of moving forward with information that you have, and I'd be more than willing to have you share it with me and we can make some calculations. But I think with 22 students in the count and 3 as a reserve, that would mean 5 additional students in the district for the beginning of next year. And I just don't see that in the cards.
Well, I understand that you did not see it, but the district sees it, right? And that's really the crux of this, is that we were elected to represent you and everyone on the call, everyone, in the room, right? And so I want to make sure that you understand that, I'm happy that you're putting out information, that you're trying to be informed, right? That you're trying to challenge, right, what we're putting out there, what the SU is putting out there. But I just want to make sure the public knows that you may not have all the information, right, to properly give and make assumptions. Like, the other part to it is legal fees. Now, you've sat in my position, right? You've sat in my position and you've run into legal situations, right, that cause money. We ran into litigation, right, when I assumed the seat, that, we had to deal with, right? We had to talk to lawyers. We have a building use, right, that, we're going to talk about later in discussion, right, under new business. But we have a lot of demand towards that building. We have possible new revenues possible revenue streams that we could bring into the fold to offset the maintenance, right? We have conversations with consultants such as Efficiency Vermont that is offered to do a free energy check to capture some of the low-hanging fruit. We could bring down the assumptions on the budget, right, and create a surplus for the next year. And that's really my point, right, is that this is about longevity, right? Not just about immediate gain in the face of rising house prices, but long-term, what are we looking at? Because that's the fiscal responsible way of handling a budget.
Well, I think that when you realize that the average assessed value in the property in Windham is going up between 60 and 70%, and you look at the tax rate, there are individuals in town that are looking at their education tax, just the education tax, not the municipal tax, going up by 35 or 40%, because the values of their property have increased significantly, and the education tax only applies to the house site value of their property. So there are individuals who are going to be looking at significant increases in their taxes. Next year in 2025, if you've got 22 students, that would equate to about 44 long-term average weighted students, which would mean that the tax rate could go down significantly in the following year. And it's an average going forward for 2 years. So you would average the 44 and the 33, students to determine what the long-term average is. And then in the following year, it would go up even more.
I mean, that's exactly my point, right? Is we cut the budget now, right? Let's just say we do that. And let's say that we use up our surplus. But we're going to have a benefit coming into FY26, right? There's going to be a normalization in terms of, one, the CLA this year and the housing, crisis that we're running into. I understand the need for savings, right? Everyone would appreciate that. I mean, going back to your list, I can't remember the exact term, but you said that it would be prudent not to give those stipends, right, in the model of Stratton.
That is correct.
Those people, right, the feedback that I've received, those people that were on that petition with you would not receive that money. Say the Mountain School people. You're telling them, those people that you advocate for school choice, right? Now they're brought into the fold, even if they weren't a part of a private, right, or an independent school, right? If they want to go to any other place, such as Floodbrook, Wardsboro, Jamaica, they have that option, and they should have that option. And just because the bus doesn't go there doesn't mean that they shouldn't have relief financially. I don't see how that's prudent.
Well, I think if you ask the parents if they'd be willing to pay for their own transportation, many of them would say yes, they're currently doing it.
And it goes back to the information that the district has. I have asked, and a lot of them are telling me that exactly that we would appreciate that money. That money goes into those families' pockets. If you're truly about the parents, that is a great way to support the parents, especially in the face of shifting their kids, right, to a new school. And maybe they don't want to go to Townsend. And maybe they're from, going to go have their kids at Mountain School. I just want you to be cognizant of that, right? And I want furthermore the public to be cognizant of that, right? Is that's what's on the table, is that there's a number of assumptions from the amount of students to the legal fees that will occur, that stipends that rightfully should go to these parents. And then we get onto the building, right? I've already discussed a number of ways, and we're going to discuss in detail in this meeting of ways that we can cut against and offset that maintenance. Now, we're not going to do it, we're not going to hit the full 50,000, 48,000, within the next weeks, but over time, right, as we address issues, as we work with the SU, right? The other thing that I'm working with is talking with Lori, with Greg, in terms of the condition. We have a report out there that isn't done by the SU. It's done by the AOE. And furthermore, it wasn't even done when, typically with the AOE, they operate, right, with the faculty at hand to get the best assessment that they can. Mickey had left by that time, right? And it's no shade to the faculty are there, but he was the best resource for the AOE to lean on. And that said, the report, I don't know if you have access to the AOE report, but there's a lot, there's a lot that they've noted, right, in terms of the viability of the building, from how it's built to code, it's in good shape, a new wood floor, you have the playground, you have a new boiler, you have a roof that's in good shape, right? All of this is incredibly important, right? We as a community can focus on long-term, right? While contributing to the pot of our community. And we can focus on the future, right? What do we do with this building? Maybe it does go to the town, right? But have you talked to the town? Because I've talked to each of the select board members, right? I've talked to everyone involved. Essentially does not see a viable path right now in the immediate to the building. We need that fund, right? We need that fund to not only keep the lights on, but meet the demand that we're seeing. And that's really what I want to stress, is that this is not just numbers to cut off of a budget, right? And budget items that will never come back. But these are incredibly important numbers, right? That you're reframing as a savings. And I get that, right? You ran on assumptions, and I understand assumptions. I'm a statistician. I work for the railroad, and those type of numbers and assumptions can make the difference between. I regulate with the Department of Transportation, and those type of numbers can be the difference between a pressure relief valve working on the road.
Did you get cut off?
I think we froze. The video was frozen.
Oh, can everyone hear me?
I can hear you, Russ. Can Windham Elementary School hear me?
I can't hear Windham Elementary School.
Oh, well, we'll try to fix that.
Yeah, me neither.
All right, can you hear us now? How about now?
Oh.
Ah.
Can we hear you?
Hey.
Windham?
Hello.
You're back on.
Hello. All right.
Best speech of his life.
No, really.
I don't know about that, but the point is, in my professional life, right, I work as a statistician, right, and I work for the Department of Transportation as a consultant, an independent consultant. And my assumptions could be the difference between a pressure relief valve, right, working fine on the road, and in another case, a critical failure that can occur on the road, say in East Palestine, and a vinyl chloride lades and pressurizes and shoots 100 feet into the air, right, and causes issues with housing prices, with people's well-being, with water sources. My point is that assumptions are great to work with, but in the case of working with unknowns, it's important to be responsible with those assumptions.
Okay, we do have, can you guys hear us?
We can hear you now, but definitely lost you for a couple of seconds there. And
But we're back.
All right, yep, you are back.
Okay. So now I don't know, did you want Russ to do that? So there's a couple hands that are up. I didn't know. I'll
Yeah.
kind of take
Yeah, as chair, you can definitely,
The end result is going to be what the voters approve. So you can have the budget, you can have your petition, and if the voters vote down the budget, then you have to find another solution. But it's a matter of, I've tried to present what I thought was a reasonable alternative, looking at the information I had available to me, and came up with a way to save close to $100,000 in tax and the money needed to raise to educate the kids. It's that simple. Thank you.
And it's just as simple as it's not simple at all, right? It's not saving $150,000, right? If we're going to incur it into next year, if it's going to set us into a deficit, if we're going to use up all of our surplus, if we're not going to have those line items back in the budget, right? And a safety net for the parents, for them to have transportation, for us to be covered legally, right? In the steps that we take with the building. I mean, all of this is incredibly important.
I agree. Thank you. So order of hands that I have is Crystal, I believe Crystal Corview. Then it'll be Emily, then will be Aaron. So Crystal, go ahead.
Abby, it's up to you if you touch on the bus stuff. I felt pretty good about Greg's response and everybody else's, but I did send correspondence around pre-K and nobody responded, and I also don't see it on the agenda.
I don't know that I.
Yeah, I don't see it in mine.
Who's got their
But
phone on?
was Bob on it? Bob, did you see it?
It was actually sent to Dan first, because it'll directly impact him as well as some other parents of young kids.
Yeah.
I replied to your email that you sent the other night for the board meeting, asked you to touch base on the pre-K.
yeah, I see an email on the 26th sent to the board and myself.
Okay, yeah, I'm seeing something now.
I got it in spam.
Yeah,
So sorry, Crystal.
Yeah, I apologize, Crystal. It also went to my spam. I don't know why. I'm reading it now.
I could give you the short version about pre-K is that because Windham didn't and doesn't
We can't hear you, Bob.
Oh boy. That technical issue.
payable to any pre-K, public or private, and that's been going on for a long time. If a family from Windham chose to send their child to a public pre-K, that school who receives that child would, in essence, charge the Windham residents personally, not the school district, but the Windham resident personally, for the difference between whatever the 10 hours covers and the total cost of tuition for the year. And so the family would have to pay the difference because Windham does not operate a public pre-K program. That does not, you guys not having a school does not change that. That would still be in effect. So it really wouldn't, what you guys have gone through in the last year does not change anything having to do with pre-K. It doesn't add additional money to your budget because you've closed for pre-K. It's so 10 hours per family or per kid payable to a private or public. Does that answer what you were looking for?
I was hoping the board could look at, what they currently pay for pre-K. And again, this will be important to Daniel in a couple more years. And I can tell you now, I know one parent that pays
I can tell you that.
$700 a month. So if it's something you could look at for the future, it doesn't impact me because I am done with pre-Kers.
Well, hey, I personally, I appreciate you planting seeds, right, for a tree you won't see the shade, right? Because I think there's a lot of parents, and going back to feedback that I've gotten, since the last meeting, there's a lot of parents that are, planning or have gotten pregnant and want to have kids, in this district. And I think, it's an important issue. So I'll look into it.
Thank you, Crystal. Emily Gwinnett?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome, Emily.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to speak to assumptions with Russ, and I don't think that's entirely accurate because I know he's spoken to me and some other parents about a stipend for transportation, and we some of us are happy transporting our kids to school as long as we get to go to the education that we're hoping for. So I wouldn't say that everyone needs a stipend, but if it was a deciding factor among us being able to choose an independent school, we would choose the independent school over an independent school plus stipend.
Well, and just I'm prepared, at least personally, but I'd like to speak for the district a little bit of we could have it both, right? There's no reason that the public kid school should, the public kid families should have access to the stipend and you wouldn't, right? In that scenario, in that scenario, would you want, if it was an opt-in situation, would you turn down transport, money to your family to transport to mountain school?
I would.
I guess it needs to make sense financially in our tax rate as far as I'm concerned, because I travel that way for work anyway. So it's not, for some families, it would be a bigger difference than it would be for me, I assume.
No, and that's good to hear. Like I said, we've had feedback from others, but I'm not going to name names. If they want to, come forward, they can. But I'm glad that he discussed with others. But there's definitely correspondence that we've gotten that they would like to have transportation stipend. And the other thing that I want to note is that this non-operational budget, right, is functionally not different from the budget that was used to compare, right, at vote day for you to make and others to make a decision on whether or not to do open choice, right? So essentially we offered it, right, as a comparison and said, if you vote, right, this would be the budget that you would get. We promised that to you. And then now we would take it away. I just think it's immoral. I don't agree with it.
Okay, does answer your question, Emily?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Erin Kehoe.
Hey guys, I'm going to first touch on Crystal's because this may help clarification more. I think what Crystal was asking was for additional hours to be put in the budget for Windham to offer for pre-K. Like down in Manchester, I want to say it's the Meadowy district, offers an additional 10 hours for a total of 20 hours offered towards the pre-K stipend from the town. So I think that's what she was trying to help out the rest of the community with. Since other towns do that and offer an additional 10 hours, I think that's what she was looking for. Am I right, Crystal? Well, and the other one with budgeting. Now, I've done a lot of budgets in my time. And with this, it's hard for me to understand why you would budget for the unknown. Like in a business world, you're not going to budget for bad debts. It's going to happen, right? You can't say you're going to have $50,000 of bad debts. So for like lawyers' fees, I mean, to take your average over the course of a 3-year would probably be a better thing, which would probably be around the $2,000 to $3,000 mark for your average. So I don't know why those increases are needed. Assumptions that also Daniel made about he talked to all of these people that are transporting their kids. I was not talked to. And he said he had spoken to them. I have not heard from the board about anything about what I, as a parent that transports kids back and forth, wants. I don't believe anybody else that I directly know has been asked currently. So I think that's an unfair assumption to be made. And also the assumptions of the parents that are here that do transport to another school, that do pay for another school, were on that petition. I wasn't, but we just made that assumption that I was. So with that being said, going back to the budget, I mean, I don't need a transportation stipend. We do not need to offer transportation. I don't think it's a make or break deal. Yes, it would be nice, but we've been doing it for so long. I've been driving back and forth to Manchester without a transportation stipend for years. So what makes it different now? Are we going to do back pay if we do that? When you think about it, I don't think that needs to be in the budget. I don't know why we're budgeting to keep the school fully operational where it really could just be heat, the basic things to keep the building from not freezing, and regular repair to keep it up to code. So I don't know why we'd budget for that if the school is not going to operate and there's no plan for viable income at this moment. It shouldn't be budgeted for.
Okay, thank you, Erin.
Yeah, and I have a couple thoughts there. So
Go for it.
So I mean, the first one is, the way that Russ is framing, right, is about savings. So essentially what you would be trading the stipend for is savings, right? So, the net, I mean, it would be, what, a net benefit of a couple of dollars, right? Like it wouldn't be too much of a difference. But the other thing that you touched on that I think it's an important place to kind of sit on is business, right? This is a public, right, represented district, right? We're not a business, right? But in speaking terms, right, we should be fiscally responsible, right? Fiscally responsible to you, Erin, to Frank, to everyone that's raising hands, right? And I think that what we're talking about is not a business, it's a community, right? What do we represent? What do we offer the parents, right? When a petition was brought forth, right, I chose to acknowledge it and I pushed for it, right? Because I thought under the circumstances that it makes sense to hear out the petition, right, and warn an article. Personally, I would have liked the school to continue, right? And other boards have ignored petitions. The other, I had something on the assumption on the stipend, but honestly I cannot remember at this point because you made a lot of points, right? And I appreciate the feedback. Oh, the assumption on the stipend. I didn't say that I reached out. I got correspondence back to me, right? And no, I'm not going to name names, but I'm telling you now that there are parents that would appreciate that stipend.
So I understand that there are parents that would appreciate it. I didn't ask you to name names. I did not come there. But also, unfortunately, it is still technically a budget, right? And you have to be fiscally responsible. So in some sense, it still needs to be run in a business-like manner. It's not always going to be what everybody likes or what they don't like. It is going to be what's best for the taxpayers and the children of the community. So if the building, as far as I know, cannot operate as a school while it's closed, or a childcare facility, Bob might need to help with that. So I don't know why we would, again, put those things into the budget if we can't use the building for things like that.
No, and it goes back to what I was challenging Russ on, is assumptions, right? But like I said, there is a lot that we're going to bring up on this meeting about people that want to use the building, right? Revenue sources, this or that, right? And we'll definitely get into those details.
So, but a revenue source, again, would turn it back into a business.
I'm not arguing that we need, honestly, the best businesses, right, are paying zero effective tax rate, right? And our fiduciary responsibility is to stakeholders, right? Our responsibility is not to stakeholders, right? It's to the community, right? What are the best needs, right? What do we put forward in terms of policies? It's not strictly a business. But that said, I think as a business, it makes sense to plan for those unknowns. Because, like I said, we solve today's tax dilemma and we create tomorrow's deficit, right? We're going to cause, I'm concerned with my generation and my child's generation, right? Not having the systems in play, the public goods, the services, right? The money, the budget items, right? Necessary for long-term planning. That is what I'm talking about.
Well, long-term planning is definitely one thing, but those should be listed out and brought to the public, and not just say, hey, we're going to just keep this budget for running a building without those things to be noted.
And I can tell you that we are working on a roadmap, right? Exactly that.
So I'm going to touch point on that, because if you guys are working on this roadmap, and yes, you did try to be transparent with the letter that you sent out, and I do appreciate that, but it also stated in there that you guys are working on all this stuff. And that to me is, you're not working in the public's eye. You are having closed meetings behind closed doors and doing all this work and not letting the public know.
Well, that's exactly what we're doing here, right? That's the purpose of the updates, is to give that information, right? And the other thing that you're overlooking in my email is encouraging people to be a part of that, right? And yourself included, because we represent you and we would like you to be a part of the conversation.
But the point is that my point with this, especially with what you just said, is that you guys are talking about it not with the public, and then bringing your ideas to the public instead of having a conversation about it with the public, and or forming a committee to go forward with it that doesn't include all of you.
Well, I see how many agenda items exactly to that, right? Communicating with the public, discussion after discussion, right? You're going to have that chance. And we have to arm ourselves with facts. Going back to my argument against Russ, is that we have to get our facts straight before we can even address the public. Would you like me just to not research and not go through the building? We're working on inventory, right? What can we sell to other districts? I understand your frustration that you maybe don't have perfect transparency, but we're working towards that transparency. Just like I said at the top of the meeting, we would like to put out more school updates. And I would love for that. I would love for you to be involved. I would love for anyone to be involved, right? Within Windham.
Okay. So at the very beginning of the meeting, we had mentioned the changes to the agenda, how the time had kind of changed. And I just wanted to we do have a few hands that are still up, but just to kind of make people be aware, we haven't gotten past correspondence. So as much as I want to encourage exactly what you're saying, Daniel, I also want to keep us on task for the meeting so we don't end up with the unchanged times and end up here till 8 o'clock.
I totally agree.
Yeah, so if possible, I know we said 3 minutes per comment, and I think we've been being a little flexible with that. So for folks going forward here, let's just keep that in mind. We would like to hear what you have to say, but we're gonna have to be kind of sticking to the timeline here. So, Aaron, did that answer your question, or do you feel comfortable with that? Can we move on to the next person, or is there more that you have?
You can go on to the next person.
Okay, thank you, Aaron.
Thank you, Aaron.
B. And then we have Frank C. Wright or Nancy, I'm not sure, and Bridget Corby.
So go ahead.
Hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
So I was one of those folks that reached out proactively to Dan. I wasn't asked. I just, had reached out to say that I completely hear the, Emily and Aaron's points for current parents who are currently transporting their kids elsewhere. I have a child who will be entering the school system this coming fall, and we live about 3 minutes from the Windham school. So up until recently, we were operating under the assumption that, there would be a 3-minute bus ride to school every day. Now, obviously, that's changed. I don't know that Townsend will meet our needs for a variety of reasons. And so either we look for other public school choices or an independent school. And in either of those scenarios, we're now going from without the stipend, having free transportation to having, time and money needing to go towards something that was provided by the town before. And I like I said, I understand that not everybody is in that boat, but one of the advantages of this school choice vote, I thought meant that we would still have the same benefits that came with a public school. And that includes transportation. So it does limit our options if we're expected to pay the additional fee. And again, I think it was like $5,000 or something in the budget. I appreciate Dan's comment around, it's a public service. So yes, it might cost taxpayers, I don't know, $5 extra each a year, something like that, $10, I don't know. But I think we are, getting towards altering what a public entity like our local government is able to provide if we start removing those things just to kind of pinch pennies.
Thank you.
Well said. Thank you.
I'm not sure if this is Frank or Nancy, but you're next in queue.
It's Frank. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, sir. Go ahead.
You can never be sure. Well, first of all, Aaron pretty much very ably covered the things that I would want to cover. I'll just say 2 things. Daniel keeps, that has brought up that the budget that we're talking about now is the same as the one that was voted down. And so the more cynical amongst us, me being one of them, might think that one of the reasons for being resistant to Russ's suggestion would be to make it look like nothing will be saved here.
Yeah, Frank, I'm going to stop you there. That is absolutely what I did not say that. What I said was we used a non-operational budget as a comparison to our operational budget. The operational.
Yes, I didn't. You got that on me, I will on you. I didn't accuse you of doing it. I said the more cynical amongst us may see it that way. I think it was
possible when I said that it was a comparison budget. And it's exactly what we're promoting here. Exactly the same numbers, these same line items.
Right. I understand that. And I think it's actually sort of foolish to keep arguing about this, and the $5,000 stipend seems relatively small potatoes compared to the other bigger issues. I think that the issue of the stipend can be sort of explicated more fully in a group, especially if you want to be open and transparent. Get these parents, have them form a committee and make up a recommendation to get back to you, rather than having apparently meetings amongst you and Abigail and
No,
Rory.
we did not. Yeah,
Right, there's
yeah,
not
yeah.
any
Let's make sure that the public knows there was no violation of any open meeting laws. When I speak as a district, yeah, but we did not have any secret meetings or anything of the such. We respond to correspondence. We field calls.
I didn't know about them.
Okay.
And
You're not going to be aware of everything that happens in the SU in the district. It's our job in these meetings to inform you, right, and get opinions, talk to the public, right? But every conversation, every correspondence, it's up to the person that sends it whether or not they want it to be in the meeting.
Okay.
Whatever that means.
So, thank you, Frank. We're going to move on to Bridget Corby.
Using the timer.
I don't have host.
Would you like to be made host, Daniel? That'd be helpful.
I feel like that would be.
Okay, Bob.
I'm here, sorry. I'm here.
Current
All right, hold on one
circumstances.
moment, Bridget. Bob, Thibault, could you make Daniel host, please?
I think I can operate without it and put the timer up. No need. Go ahead, Bridget. Sorry.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Bridget.
Okay, so 2 quick points to make. And with the transportation stipend, I do understand the thought of helping families, but just keep in mind that in Russ's proposal to reduce the tax dollars, that's also a huge benefit to families because their taxes are very high, which is a burden to a lot of people. So I'm not saying that it's, just something to factor in there is that we pay a lot in taxes. And that is a fairly big burden. The other piece is, Daniel, you referenced reaching out to select board members. I'm not saying that you did this in a way you weren't supposed to. So please don't think that I'm accusing you of anything. You can talk to them. Has the board considered meeting with the select board in an open forum with the community to have a conversation about what to do with the building instead of putting all of these building costs into the budget? It would make sense to spend the next year paying for the bare minimum of the building just to make sure the pipes don't freeze while you make a plan instead of the school board managing what could be a great community center. There are different ways to do it. Why don't you have a lower budget and then a community conversation in an open meeting?
Yeah, and I appreciate that comment. I brought it up to Russ that once we get rid of, right, those line items towards the operation of the building, right, they're likely not to come back. And the scenario that's at play is we don't know what we're going to do yet, right? A part of it is the conversation that we're going to have with everyone here, but we need to figure this out. And I totally agree that I would like us as a board, as a district, to meet with the select board in a joint type of meeting, and I think that's logically where we're going towards, right? Keep in mind, this has not been a long time since the last vote day, right? So a lot's been thrust on us in terms of how to operate this building, how to work with the budget, right? But I'm looking at it from a case of we're going to use up our surplus, right, for immediate relief and not look towards long term. And then we thrust it onto the town. I want to make sure that we're doing the research. And yes, I would like to form a committee. I would like to do those things. And I think it's up for discussion, right? So nothing's ruled out, essentially is what I'm saying.
So thank you, Bridget. And as Daniel, I think, highlighted, we have a lot more later on in the agenda that may even encompass some of what you had asked there. So moving on to alternatives of bus transportation. I know Crystal had hopped on in the beginning and said that. Is there any more as far as that correspondence that anyone wants to touch upon or talk about? Or do we feel like that I know Crystal had mentioned she felt her response that she had gotten was adequate, if I'm not mistaken, Crystal?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a part of the conversation with the surplus, right? Is we're gonna have to replace the bus at a certain point, right? You know, even if we don't have the building, we're gonna have the transportation, right? So either we go fully stipend or we replace the bus or make renovations, right? Make repairs, right? We need that money. We need that money as a district. We need that money as a community.
Yeah, I mean, my concern wasn't around the new bus and so on and so forth. My concern was around if Cord had planned on staying on next year and the concern of lack of bus drivers. But I think Greg answered it. I felt satisfied. I assume you did. I mean, I guess if you want to touch base with the community, that's up to you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Crystal.
thank you.
So moving on to old business. Let's see, so the minutes from 3/19/24 and the minutes from the annual meeting that Mac had done. So I will make a motion, there'll be two motions for this. Making a motion to approve the minutes from 3/19/24. Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Excellent job. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. I make a motion to approve the minutes of the annual meeting. Can I get a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, motion passes. Approve financials. So we had pay order 28 from last time that got moved forward. Is that accurate, Lori?
Yes, you all approved it by email. So 28 was $3,472.93. And then this time around, you had pay order 31, which was $3,846.63. And just in case somebody asked, the 29 and 30 are payroll. So when you sign letters of agreement, employment, you're basically approving payroll, so for the year.
Okay.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you. So I will make a motion to, I know we do that online, but make a motion to approve pay order 31.
Second your motion.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, pay order 31 is all set. And if you do not have the signatures, we'll make sure to get that done right away.
Yeah, can you go ahead and do the public of 28, because that we put that off. You didn't actually do it publicly for 28.
Make a motion can we amend the motion to approve pay order 31 and 28? Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay, so it was the same as before, we're just gonna amend it to include both pay orders. So we have the one.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Designate a newspaper. I'm still, I think, Lori, you had mentioned it had come out before, like well in time before, so it would be appropriate to use the shopper.
I did not get it on a Saturday. I got it on a Friday, I believe.
But it was
So,
well before
Thursday.
what it would have been the Thursday for our meeting.
Oh, yeah,
Right, so
definitely.
it would have had enough time.
Yeah, as long as we were, a week ahead.
I move to designate the paper as the shopper.
Yeah,
Second.
Second, okay, any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay, that's done. Discussing Robert's Rule of Order for small schools. So for those that are here in your packet, I know that that's in there as well. Daniel, did you want to kind of talk about that at all with the difference in anything, or are you, if I can find it in here?
Not particularly. I mean, we
There's some
talked.
small changes, right, from the difference between,
Well, and we talked about the. Bob, I don't know if you want to touch on this. I don't know if it's related to the consent agenda for say approving, going through the motions of all of the different minutes and financials all in one sweep. Is that related?
No, well, two separate things, really. The small boards rules are really just for smaller boards. And I think it gives you more flexibility. I think most boards typically operate under that because I think the rules under 12 and most boards around here have under 12. So yeah, it was just something we had offered up at the first reorg meeting, and you guys want more information on it, so I just gave you this little like 2-page quickie that gave you a little bit of information about how it's a little bit different, but it's up to you. You could just go with regular Robert's rules. You kind of already do that anyway, so it's probably not an exceptional change just to adopt Robert's rules and just move forward.
Yeah.
Okay. You guys have any thoughts on that? So do we need a motion for that, Bob, to adopt Robert's Rules of Order for small schools?
Yes. Yep.
So moved. Can I get a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Okay. Appoint a truant officer. So Bob, you want to highlight what that's about?
Yeah, that was one. I think I mentioned you guys. You guys were the first ones to reorg for me, and so I was still new, trying to figure out that process. One of the things that I missed was appointing a truant officer. And so in the past, what most of the schools in Windham County have done, because we don't have our own truant officer, is to have a contract with Windham County Sheriff's Department, who does the truancy work for us. And so basically you would appoint the Windham County Sheriff's Department to do that work. Since you are, non-operating at this point, the students will be attending different schools. Each of those schools will have their own truant officers appointed. So really, it's really just a checklist item. But that's what people are doing these days at the Windham County Sheriff's Department.
And there's no other option?
I mean, you could hire your own, but that's probably not an option you want. Yeah, typically some schools would use like an SRO if they had that, a bigger school, or a local police department like Dover might not have their own police department do it, or Wilmington.
What's the cost with Windham County?
What's the cost? Is that what we said?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's a nominal fee. It's an hourly thing. I don't know that Windham School has ever had any billing that's come from that, to be honest with you. I don't think it's happened. If it happened at the secondary level at Leland and Gray, it would have come through West River's expenses, not Windham's. So
Yeah, I don't recall any expenses.
yeah, it's just one of those compliance check marks here, I think, that you're doing it.
I personally like to dig in and learn a little bit more about that, as this is new for us. So I know it's necessary, we need to appoint that, but I'm not really comfortable with just going with Windham County just because it's Windham County and they're an option. But I want to know what the cost is, and if there hasn't been a cost, we're in a very different situation now, and what likely could we deal with a cost and no longer having kids specifically in one location. I mean, that's gonna be different. So I don't know what your guys' thought are on that, but I do want to dig in. I personally want to dig in.
Do you want to kind of take that up and see and kind of report back what you find?
Definitely.
Okay.
So perfect. Okay, so we'll
Makes
move
sense.
along. We're talking Russ, so you can wait and be patient, please. So we're gonna move that to another meeting. Okay, and we're gonna move on to the budget draft 2 discussion. So go ahead, Lori.
Okay, well, there's been a lot of discussion tonight. I do want to say that this is the budget that was used as a comparison that was presented at the your annual meeting. There have been no changes made. This was put together as requested by the board for a comparison. So it's roughly $15,000 less than the operational budget. And I'm not sure, you've talked a lot about all of the different items here. I'm not sure I can add much more to it other than to say that, really the building is what is obviously costing the most after tuition. So if there is to be savings, then it needs to be probably out of that area. The transportation is less than a penny, right? The legal fees are less than a penny on the tax rate. So really not worth spending a lot of time arguing about those. At this point in time, you can look at them next year, see what you actually spend as a non-operational budget, as a non-operating district on legal fees, and what you actually spend on providing, some stipend money. So I think that's really where, the focus, if there is to be any changes made to the budget, which, that is up to the board to task me with making the change. I do know that we are running, pretty tight on time as far as voting another budget. If it passes, then, we're in pretty good shape. If it doesn't pass, then we're in not so great shape, and we'll only be able to receive, we'll probably have to borrow, actually, to start the year with 87% of last year's budget. So there'll be some cost to that too, right? So there'll be some interest costs to having to borrow that money. So that's where we stand right now. I'm not sure that I can add much more to it. The conversation that has been had. Willing to take questions.
I had a few. One was, and I'm not seeing it right now, but this is just going off the top of my head, so bear with me. I saw somewhere something, or we were being, clearly I know transportation has changed, but the cost for transportation, we were receiving money, and that's now a very different number. And I don't know if you can maybe explain what could have happened with that. I think it was like 11,000, and now it's different. Again, I don't have it.
Yeah, no, I know what you're referring to, Abby. That is in the revenues, and what that is that when West River pays Windham to transport the secondary students, and so a couple of years ago, the subject that was brought up that gas prices were so high and all of that perhaps it should be more than $11,000. But after doing the analysis of the mileage with Cord, this was not just, I didn't do the analysis on my own, but really received the information from Cord. It was actually less than $11,000, even with the highest. And this was 2 years ago, I think, at this point, maybe a year and a half, when the gas prices were actually higher than they are now, or diesel prices were higher than they are now. So that's what that reduction reflects. And that, yes, it did include cost of wear and tear in the building. In the bus. There were a couple of different ways that I did the analysis on that had been shared with the board back then. So that's the reduction there.
Okay.
I do want to, if I can just jump into and just point out, there was a couple of things said about the audit, and Russ is correct. I do not have, I actually just received a letter from our auditors, which I can forward to the boards. I will forward to the boards, actually, basically saying that they're underwater, but that they are going to continue building their business where other auditing firms have shut down. And that is a concern of going with a different auditor, trying to find a different auditor. But I will say the $95,000 surplus is solid. Okay, so that's not an assumption. I've made that clear in other board meetings. That is a solid number. You also, because it was back in 22, that was that late entry that I told all of you about. For 23, there was a deficit. And so what my thinking is, and what I hoping to happen is that the little bit of surplus that you have ending in 24 will offset that deficit in 23, so you won't have to worry about it going forward, right? It'll just be a wash, right? So really concentrate on that 95. That is what you have for a surplus, and hopefully, you know, you probably won't add to that, but hopefully you won't have a deficit either. Daniel's right. We've been looking at, there's another district that would like to buy some curriculum that Windham purchased at the very last, you know, as they were trying to, you know, it was before the decision was made to tuition students. So, you know, that was purchased. We have another district that will purchase it. That's about $2,700, roughly $3,000 that will come in as revenue for this year. So we're looking at those types of things as well.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, and before you call on folks, yeah, I would like to encourage you know, everyone in Zoom, you know, everyone that's, you know, in the actual building here, you know, that I appreciate Russ's, you know, comments. I appreciate Crystal's comments. And I appreciate Bridget's. But I'd like to hear from the rest of you guys. You know, how do you feel about our current budget, using the surplus, right? Possibly putting ourselves, you know, as Lori just said, in a situation that we have to take out a loan. I would like to hear from, I mean, we have, you know, not to call on names or anything, but like I see Kathy, Carolyn, I see Michael and Mac, I see the Wymans, Ren. Yeah, I'd like to hear from you folks. I'd like to understand, you know, everyone's feedback towards this.
So again, get the timer ready because the hands are going up.
Yes, definitely.
All right, so the order I have right now is will be Russ, Bridget, Crystal, and then Mr. Dunkel. So go ahead, Russ.
The issue I have is the board will need to accept the audit from the auditors in order to be able to allocate the expenditures into different funds, whether it's a tuition reserve fund or it's a bus reserve fund. But in order for those funds to be available to be allocated by the board, they have to receive and acknowledge receipt and approve the audit that's been submitted. This is a technical thing, but it's the way it should work. And the other thing I wanted to say earlier is I thought Bob might want to tell the parents what truancy is, because I don't think many of them truly understand what a truant student is. Thank you.
Thanks, Russ. Go ahead, Crystal. Oh, I'm sorry, I said Bridget and then Crystal. My bad. Bridget, you there?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry. I'm cooking dinner and trying to unmute at the same time, so I'm a little slow. Lori, I was wondering if you could share, you were talking about the budget and ways to lower the budget, and it's really only building related. Can you share with everyone what some suggestions are, what the impact on the budget would be?
Sure. You know, I think that there isn't a lot that you can call out necessarily. I mean, you don't have to do all of the non-technical repairs and maintenance. So that's $13,000, right? So maybe that's reduced by $10,000 and you just do the bare minimum. You probably, if you're not using the building on a regular basis, then you probably don't need it cleaned, right? So you could reduce the salary and benefits there. The insurance you have to keep, right? So regardless, the internet's interesting because it's $5,000, which keeps going up, and the telephone, but those are things you have to keep for two reasons. The phone you have to keep because it's tied to your fire alarm, right? So you really need to keep that. And the internet is actually, we're basically in a contract with First Light for the internet. So that's something else. propane, maybe that could be reduced. Maybe not, you don't need 7,500 if you're just keeping the building idling, right? And I'd have to talk to Greg to figure out, what his estimation would be for that. And other equipment, you probably wouldn't, you could take that out as well. So, we're really talking maybe, what do we see here? Sorry. 6, so 10, 16, maybe, probably could call maybe 20,000, maybe a little bit more, 21, 22 out of here. So that's a possibility, but that would be something the board would have to consider.
Thank you, Lori. And I will remind folks that we are going to talk about current use and develop some protocols, because we do have a lot of opportunities in terms of not only renting out, right, to folks, but volunteers that have come forward and want to offer programming services. I kind of laid out a little bit in the school board updates, but I'd like to talk a little bit about that when we get to that point.
Okay, Crystal, go ahead. This time it is you, Crystal.
Yeah, I guess my question is kind of what Bridget's was, because my concern is with a non-operational school, I don't see a need for the school district to keep the building, and a $15,000 reduction in the budget that was presented at town meeting is just not enough for a non-operational district. And I know myself and my husband, we will be voting no. And I'm just concerned that if this budget fails, like, you're going to be operating on 87% of last year's budget.
Okay, thank you, Crystal. Bill Dunkel.
Yeah, my question has to do with the timetable for this vote. What is the timetable? When are we hoping to have another vote on the non-operational budget? And if that is not passed, does that make borrowing money inevitable for next school year? Would there still be time to vote on yet another budget? What's the timetable here? I'm concerned, Laurie, about your comment that if this budget is rejected, there may not be any other alternative but to borrow money.
So I can help answer the timetable question. There's been some correspondence back and forth with the town and with the Secretary of State's office to try to figure that out. And it seems as though that you could do on May 18th, which would meet the timeline requirements between 30 and 40 days notice if adopted tonight, a warning tonight. It appears that the building, the meeting house is available, and it appears that Mr. McLean is also available. So that's what we've been able to confirm through correspondence with folks at the town. So that's probably the first best available date at this point, May 18th.
Would that give us enough time if there was a need for a re-vote day? Would that give us enough time to schedule that before
if that vote failed and you had an emergency, or not emergency, a special meeting like the day or so after, then you could be warning another one for late June at that point.
Okay.
So that's pretty close timeline.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you.
But that would still be possible, a late June.
Yeah, you could. It sounds like you could sneak in too, and again, that's based on people's availability and the building availability for the meeting and all that. But just based on the number of days, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. I have Michael Pelton and then Kathy Edgerly.
My question is regarding insurance. I'm wondering, I don't have any idea how much the insurance costs and how much that impacts the budget. That being said, I'm wondering if the current insurance is the correct insurance, given that we have a non-operational school and given that it may or may not be used for other purposes.
Great question, Michael. I'll just jump in, Abby, if that's okay, and answer that because I actually just had a conversation with Visbit about Windham Elementary and using the building for other non-educational things. And as long as the school district owns the building, then Visbit will cover the insurance that we currently have will cover. And the building itself, we pay a bundled rate for insurance. So it's sort of spread out in the budget. There's some under transportation and there's some under operation of buildings. And there may even be some under board embedded in there. So it's really, I think for building, it was like 1,700, I think I saw on here. Yeah. But that's just an estimate because like I said, it's a bundled rate for Windham. Well, it's a bundled rate for Windham Central, and then we have to allocate it based on each building. So does that answer your question, Michael?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Go ahead, Kathy.
Daniel, you asked what people in the community thought, so I'm just throwing my 2 cents in here. And that is that, yes, it might cost a little bit for a year to have an operational budget, but I can't imagine that it wouldn't be worth it while you looked at all your options. And if while you're looking at your options, you can offer the building, just as Lori said, it would be insured. So you could have a homeschool pod, you could have a meeting there, you could have a square dance there. I don't know, there's probably, so I think it's asking for the town to have faith in a process that if at the end of the year, it's obvious that the building should be sold, you know, and it gives a whole year or a part of a year to have the conversations with the town, because, you know, I've seen what the town can and cannot afford with the meeting house. So I can only imagine if you had a change in use of a building and different codes would kick in. I don't see where the town has 50,000, 100,000 more dollars to go, oh, okay, let's make that a blah, blah, without studying it and looking at funding sources. And I hope, I mean, it could be that the best thing to do would be to sell the building to a Montessori school, or sell the building to somebody that wanted to have a cafe. It could be anything. But I think until we've looked and spoken to people and played out all of our options, that we're all just speaking from a point of ignorance. But I get that it will cost something. Yes, it will cost something to keep the building operational so that we can find out more. And I totally advocate for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, Kathy.
All right, I don't see any more hands up.
But can I?
Oh, yes, go ahead, Sue.
Has anybody approached you guys, like the fire department, the town? Like, the town is looking for more land, more space, like the equipment, the firehouse. Has anybody approached you
So
about that?
keep in mind too, we're really coming out of the gate with this and trying to, you know, my understanding would be we've had a lot of information thrown at us that we're trying to figure out and digest and, you know, organize. So I don't know, I mean, we're aware of those needs. But has anybody reached out to us specifically, me specifically regarding that? I have not received anything. But that doesn't mean that we aren't gonna be considering those things. It's just, it's not right, and you know, we got a lot more things going on to figure out before we can kind of even get to that step. So does that kind of answer your question? It's not.
Yeah, I have a little more to add.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, the majority of what I've heard from the town is that they're working with the meeting house, right? and they're trying, they just got off of a transition and are trying to utilize it with their committee, right? But they essentially, with the issues that they have with firehouse or fire station and the shed, right, the brownfield and things like that, right? They just don't have the bandwidth currently in the immediate, right, to also take on the schoolhouse. Now, what I've understood is that doesn't mean that that's set in stone, right? That's just the immediate right now. So to answer your question, taking the pulse, it doesn't seem like the town, would be able to utilize the school or really be able to move, on figuring out what to do with the school in the immediate, but maybe, 6 months, a year, I don't have a roadmap yet, right? But I think that's a part of the conversation. I think Bridget brought up a good point of, like, we should meet with the school, with the select board and really figure this out together, right? Of, if that were in place, right, where would they get the funds, right? What are short-term plans for it, long-term plans? Are the needs for a shed for salt? Is that more important than perhaps using the building? And I think it's up to the community, I can advocate for, what have you, but, at the end of the day, it's all of us that decide what we do with this building. So, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Can I give you an idea? But Abby's right. I mean, it's not very far from vote day, so yeah, we're doing our best to start to figure this stuff out.
Go ahead, Sally.
Are we talking about building use now? Or did we slip into that? I have to go, so I just wanted to throw out one thing, and that is that I'm happy to be involved in, possible things that could happen here, because I think there's a lot of potential. But one thing I think we should be thinking about, because I just don't know the answer to this question, is that I know there's an after-school program in Townsend, but I don't know how available it is to any of our kids, because I think most of them get on the bus and come back up here. And so I'm thinking, that maybe some after-school stuff here could be a really good thing for the community and for the kids.
Yeah.
So.
I love that idea.
I appreciate that, Sally.
Yes,
So
thank you, Sally. We have 2 hands up in Zoom. We'll take, you're heading up, thank you, Sally. I'll take Aaron Kehoe and then Michael Pelton.
Hi, so since this keeps on going back about the building use, I think the best thing that you guys could do, and for probably the quickest response, and then you would be powered with information to go to the select board and discuss these options, is to actually put out a survey within a week of, say, to the community, probably via Ellen, like a survey monkey, asking, what would you like to see happen with the school building? I think that's a very reasonable request to throw out there. Maybe just make it standard for options. Should we sell? Should we keep? Should we do it like this? Whatever you guys decide on that, but I think that would be a rapid response.
Excellent idea. Thank you, Aaron. Michael Pelton and then Kathy Edgerly.
Yeah, I got 2 things. One is I've seen a collection of emails, like huge email train that's been running around, and there are literally so many ideas. It's amazing and beautiful at the same time, but there's 50 different ideas of what the building could or could not be in the future. So I think that's definitely going to be a process, and I look forward to it. I think it's going to be interesting to see which direction we go. I do want to caution people that we want to make sure that we're not turning the school into a situation where the school building is competing with our meeting house, because the meeting house is our community center, unless we came up with some other way to use the building. But I guess that would be up to the community to figure out. I think our needs survey will help point us in the right direction for that. The other piece that I wanted to ask was, Lori, could you enlighten us how much the building costs are on the tax rate? Thanks.
Sure. Are you talking about the full $48,000, or are we talking about just bare minimum?
No, the proposed budget that the school board is bringing to the town.
Okay. to reduce the expenditures by I'm just going to use round numbers, $48,000. Currently we have a $1.66 tax rate. You'd be down to a $1.57 tax rate if you reduced the full 48. So if you compromised and did, reduced another, maybe just 23,000, that's going to be $1.62.
Sorry, I'm sort of half distracted. I apologize. So basically the building is somewhere around 10 cents on the 100. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
10 cents on 100. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Kathy Edgerly, and then I don't know, Aaron, if your hand is up again or if it's still up from before. But go ahead, Kathy.
Yep, I just want to say that rather than launch ahead with a survey, that I'm hoping we will get money and assistance from, for instance, the Vermont Rural Development Association. We're talking to them next week about doing an entire process, which would not just include what to do with the school building. It would include the broader look at the garage, the town hall, the meeting house, the fire station, so that everything would be looked at in context of the whole, rather than one building reading one way and then later only to find out it really would have been better to have it go a different direction. So if we can have patience, if we can do planning, if we can look at all of Windham, what are our needs and what facilities do we have that can best address our needs? And that would be the process that we would go through. So I'm hoping patience and planning will get us exactly to the best place we can imagine.
Thank you, Kathy. Aaron, did you have your hand up again, or is it?
Yeah, I had a question for Lori.
Oh, go ahead.
Lori, my connection broke up, so I'm not sure if I heard you correctly, but was 48,000 was the bare minimum, or was that the budgeted number if we just took out?
Yeah, that 48 was the total budget that was taken out.
Okay, so that wouldn't be the bare minimum to run the building?
No, you would have to keep about $26,000, basically, 24,000.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, my connection, I don't have fiber. We live in the woods.
No worries, Aaron. Thank you.
It was, so Aaron, it was like 10 cents, roughly 10.5 cents on the tax rate to remove the total 48,000.
Okay. So, I mean, for being in the 25% of people that their taxes would be increased, that does help my 25%. So.
Yeah. It's, I mean, on a $400,000 house, it's roughly, $360,000.
Yeah, thank you.
So when you're paying full rate,
Yeah. Don't get any discounts here.
Lori, what are the items that would be lopped off if we did the bare minimum?
So again, we just talked about this with Bridget. I said, probably you wouldn't need to have somebody employed to keep it clean if you are just basically idling the building, so to speak. You would probably, reduce the non-technical repairs down to $3,000 just to keep, if there was anything that needed attention to. And I think that there's actually, you probably have a contract with the boiler for regular maintenance, so that would probably be in that. The insurance you would obviously want to keep. The internet and telephone you would want to keep or somewhat have to keep. General supplies could be reduced down to probably $500. Electricity, there's probably some wiggle room in that. You do get some credits back on solar, so I'd have to look at that. And then propane, I think, could be reduced somewhat, and other equipment. So, I was, back of the napkin, $22,000 could be shaved off of this just to keep the building, heated, and, just to keep it going.
I mean, would it be worth to consult Greg? One of my fears is that the building, I hate waste. I hate to see this building not being utilized, right? Especially with the feedback that we've received, but also I don't want to see the building depreciate, right? So if we took out like non-technical repair, for instance, right, would we and cut back on some of like the energy bill? I mean, would we start to see some depreciation of the building? Things essentially would it fall apart, or would it, just be a little less nice to be in?
Yeah, I think, as you're making decisions, right, you're talking about a 1-year stopgap, basically, right? I mean, you're talking about wanting to do, assess what the needs are of Windham and what the building could be used for and all of that. So in 1 year, no. I mean, that's not, you yourself said that the building actually is in pretty decent shape, right? I mean, yeah, there's some long-term repairs out there, but when you read through that, facilities assessment that the AOE did, you're right, the roof is good. The structure, the bones of the building are great. So, I don't think you're going to lose much over a year. I think that a decision probably does need to be made as to what's going to happen to it long term. But
yeah. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next in queue we have Pat McLean.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. I want to just share my thoughts. I think you've heard from a lot of people about the issue of the building. I think, and it's exciting for people to think about what could be, what might be the future there. But I join in with the other people, including Kathy Fales, that says that the community needs time to consider the opportunities that are available. This is not a quick decision. It shouldn't be made in a month or two. And it's something that really needs to take a look at the whole for the town. And I think it's very important that the town is involved in making this decision and has a chance to take a look at costs and opportunities. I also think it's really important that the school board focuses its effort on the education of Windham's children and to make sure that things are really in place so that these children can get to school next fall. That's the focus of the school board, is the children and their education. And I'd like to see a little more discussion about what's going to be done to ensure that parents know about choices that are available for their children. The superintendent had talked about a fair with people from the different schools to come and talk to the parents. I think these are very important things that need to be done soon, much sooner than we need to make decisions about the school building. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Emily Goyette.
Hi.
Hi, Emily.
Hi. I don't want to pay for a school that's not open. So I think that it makes the most sense to sell the building to the town so that not just the homesteaders are paying, like Russ was talking about in the beginning. I think we should trim a bunch of fat off it and just pay to keep the building's pipes from freezing until we take the time to decide what to do with it. And then that way, I think that makes the most sense for everyone.
Thank you, Emily. I just want to remind folks we're discussing with Lori the budget draft. So we continue to address building use. and I understand how it's kind of connected with what the budget is proposing. But let's try to keep it focused on, as much as we can, the budget. Clearly we have a lot to explore and figure out what's going to happen with the building. So just like to keep that in mind. So I don't know if that is Michael Simons or if that's Mac.
It's both of us.
Oh, okay.
Trying to get the video to work. Okay, there. Wait a minute. That's
Working, but
there we go. We're both here. Yeah, we want to state our support for the budget and for the school board itself. I know that you guys have had so many meetings and you have gone back and forth over this budget, and you've considered everything you can possibly consider about it. And I have faith in you. I have faith in you three guys, and in Lori and Bob, who've been helping you. I think that this, I hear what you're saying about the importance of community. I hear what you're saying about leaving the school so there are all kinds of options still available for us. And that makes total sense to me. I would hate for this to become a matter of let's cut a penny off of our tax rate here, and maybe we can cut 2 pennies off there if we do this and that. You guys have thought this through, and I want to support you for that. We need time to figure out what's going to happen. That's been stated, and it's clearly a wise thing to say. This is not something that we're going to be able to figure out overnight, what's going to happen with the building or what's even going to, how these things are going to work out for our students. And we need to make those plans. And supporting this budget, to me, it sounds like that gives us the most possible advantages that we can find for our community and for our children.
I want to double say that, and she said it very well. I trust this school board. They know what they're doing to make the right decisions to transition Windham into a new era.
Thanks.
Thank you both. And
Thank
thank
you
you for
both.
turning your cameras on. It's nice to see your faces.
Okay, we
Thank
have Sue Pray, and then we're gonna move to Michael Pelton. So go ahead, Sue.
So the issue is, there's only $15,000 difference between operational and non-operational? Is that what people are, yeah, so that's why they're wanting to trim the fat.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Michael Pelton?
I know there's a lot of discussion about removing $20,000 or something off of the budget. For $150, it seems like it would be unwise to remove that amount of money, especially when you think of in terms of maintenance. Keeping the building maintained should be sort of a number one priority, especially if we're looking at possibly selling it in the future, whether it's a private sale or selling it to the town or whatever. We don't want the building to fall apart. Let's say within the last 10 years, I worked for an organization that was run by the state, and they chose to shutter the building that I was in. And during that process, they made a determination that they were going to minimize the amount of maintenance and work on the grounds of the property. And it was 100 acres, had multiple buildings. It was a big chunk, right? It was a lot of money, and people were trying to trim the budget and make the state budget, feasible, and so on and so forth. Well, by doing so, what ended up happening is they turned a property that was worth a significant amount of money. They turned it into a property that was basically extremely hard to sell because people didn't want to buy it. It had fallen apart. It literally fell apart. And it wasn't because anybody tried to make it that way. They just stopped funding the small things. And when the small things get let go, it becomes a problem. I did a walk around the exterior of the building the other day, and I could see significant damage on the siding. And I know that siding appears to be just sort of superficial, but that's a pretty good indicator of what's happening underneath. And if we have rotting siding on the building and we're not taking care of it, eventually it'll get into the core of the building. My guess is that if we were to remove all of the siding that was falling apart and punky and no good, we would probably find some structural damage on the newer part of the building, and that will need to be repaired, and it's going to cost a little bit of money. But if we put off the little things, like clearly that's not on the budget for this year. If it was, that would be, an extra 10 grand or something. But if we don't take care of the little things, it's going to be a bigger problem in the future. And I think that there has been historically things have been put off, like deferred maintenance, for a long time. And what we now see as immediate needs are only the bigger things, and it's sort of ignoring what has been deferred maintenance in the past. So I would not advocate for removing any maintenance funds. I think it's a bad idea. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Michael.
Hey, Michael, can I ask you a question? I know you don't represent the entirety of the select board, but just the idea of the school board meeting in a public setting with the select board. I guess my first question is how would we go about that? And, is that something that, you personally would be interested in? And, certainly we could talk to George and to Cord as well.
I think that's a good idea. We can have a conversation. I think that's at some point, we're going to have a larger conversation as a community to figure out what the direction is, whether that's going to be that the community absorbs the school or not. I think that we could have some preliminary conversations at this point, but I think until we have the needs survey and really understand the larger picture, it may be a sort of premature. But I think we can definitely have a conversation. I think really just reach out to the board as a whole, and we can stick it in as an agenda item and agree to meet on, during a meeting. It's not a big deal. I think it's a good idea. We can sort of start having some of the prelim conversations as a group.
Yeah, I guess my motivation is I would like to hear, from the entirety of the select board and understand kind of, in the immediate, what your thoughts are, right? In terms of selling it to the town, of whether or not, you could utilize it competing with the meeting townhouse, which none of us want. So do you think it would make sense to do prior to the revote, or it makes more sense to develop a roadmap and then start talking with you guys?
Yeah, start having it. I think there's a lot of different things that need to be established before we can really determine what the direction of the town is, at least from my perspective. For instance, if the building is to be absorbed by the town and repurposed, what kind of changes do we need to make to the building if we were going to use it? Because it's repurposing the building. So it's no longer going to be up to code, potentially, right? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. And that's sort of one of the things that we need to establish. If it is going to be, quote unquote, up to code, that's great. But if it's not, what are those costs going to be? Because from my perspective, from looking at the information that I've seen $325,000 that need to be invested into the building over the next 5 years, plus any additional expenses that may need to be brought into the picture to bring it up to code for a repurposing of the building, if we choose to use the building. So, maybe we're looking at a $400,000 proposition. And I would agree with Russ that it is easier for us to pay that amount of money as a town in municipal tax than with school tax, because school tax effectively, for every dollar we spend at the school, another dollar goes to the state, and that's not necessarily copacetic. However, I also have to recognize that we've had challenges trying to finance and fund upgrades to the meeting house, and they are nowhere near $425,000. So I think that's something that we need to think about. That's not saying it's not achievable, but it's something that we really need to think about and develop a clear path moving forward. And the needs survey will help us with that. We can think about starting to develop like a grants plan if that's the direction we need to go. I think that there are ways that the school board could potentially alleviate some of those costs before it came to that, let's say. Like even like you were talking to the Efficiency Vermont, if Efficiency Vermont was to come up with a plan to to put in some, like, let's say replace those back windows. The back windows are single pane windows from 1969, probably. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like those are old windows. They clearly need to be replaced. So
again, I appreciate you, Michael. I just want to keep focused on our budget questions. We have a section of the agenda that is going to be talking about future use and current use. And so this is great, and I appreciate everything that you're saying. But I think it can also be brought back up again on that section of the agenda. So we're going to move forward. I'm going to take a few more of the hands that are raised, and we're going to be moving on because this is, we've got more business to get through. Okay. Is that reasonable, Michael?
of course, you're the boss.
Okay. iPad 2, I believe that's Tom or Eileen. We haven't heard from you yet, so.
Yeah, I just want to point out that this is Tom. I just want to point out that the town already owns the meeting house. The town needs to put significant amount of money into that. Kathy has got us a $75,000 grant that we need to use within the next few years. The meeting house committee has been meeting for 4 or 5 years. We have about 20,000 we can put in. There's also a group called Friends of the Meeting House, which have a little money.
Tom, I don't want to interrupt you, but I'm you. Is this about the school
I
budget?
just don't want the school to be competing against the meeting house.
We agree with you 100%. Okay, thank you very much, Tom. Aaron Kehoe, your hand is up. Is there anything,
Lori, just, so the budgeted number was, I don't have it in front of me, like 570-ish.
579, 344.
And is there something funny?
No, I
She
think
put
it's
a
just like,
specific number to it, and it was, in comparison, it was funny.
All right. So Lori, in a quick,
it's not laughing at you.
in a quick representation, what would be a bare minimum budget that you could probably put forward if you have one kind of off the top of your head? So we have a number versus a number. I know, I'm sorry, Lori. I've been bothering you for about 10 years with budget numbers.
yeah, I mean, I think that, if you're looking at a bare minimum budget, then, I'll be honest, Russ's ideas were probably where you're going to be. I don't necessarily agree with cutting the students. I think that especially going into a non-operational situation, I think that it's to have some phantom students. Every district that I know that is non-operational builds in phantom students every year. So I guess I would leave that in. So I would say more like 75,000 you could cut. I think Russ's number was 100. So.
Okay, so we could say $510,000, an estimated rough guess, $510,000 for a bare minimum budget.
Bare minimum, right?
Okay, all right. That way everybody kind of has an idea of the savings. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Bill Dunkel.
I don't see how it makes much sense to budget to heat that building to a comfortable level for an entire another year if nobody's ever going to be in it and use it. Dan, you said very early in the meeting, that there might be some use the building will have next year. There might be a way to raise some revenue. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. I'm assuming that the budget that you're going to present is based on the assumption that that building's going to be vacant for an entire year. Now, maybe that's not a good assumption. If it's going to be used in some way and it might generate some revenue, then it makes sense to budget to heat it and to, you know, keep the electricity budget what it always is and so on. But if that's going to be a building that's sitting there empty for an entire year, I don't see why you're going to clean it and why you're going to heat it to a level that it needs to be comfortable for people who aren't going to be in it. So
Yeah.
is there any chance it's going to get used for anything?
That's
when we get to do business there. I'm hoping we'll get there soon. But yes, there's a lot we'll get to. Go ahead.
I mean, if I had to redo this, right, in terms of the agenda, I think I would put the budget draft at the back here because, but what I'm finding is that there is a lot of demand, right? Sally mentioned after school. There's people that are interested in yoga, paying for the auditorium to use it, right, regularly. There's people that are interested in bringing their homeschool pod here, right? Maybe like one day or 2 days a week. There's events that people, community garden, but also just events like a Green Up Day, right? A luncheon, that we could do during that time. Winter's Table has been brought up. Maybe that's the host is here at the school. Daycare. I have another volunteer that came up that's an accomplished musician and wants to do music classes on Thursdays.
Foreign language, there's been some interest of people willing to teach foreign language and other things. So.
I mean, not just that, right? Like, I'm sorry, Russ?
No, please stay muted.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Volunteers for time slots as well, right? Just open use. Right. And that doesn't just affect Windham, right? Our building policy reaches further than just Windham. Our neighboring towns are our neighbors, right? Jamaica, Wardsboro, Londonderry. Yeah, they can use the building as well, right? Assuming that they sign a waiver, which of course they will, right? And so these are just some of the ideas that have been brought forth by multiple individuals, right? So I definitely see a world where, not only is there demand, but I think there's immediate demand, right? That we probably should start talking about rental agreements, right? We should start figuring out, like Michael said, some of the legal stuff. Going back to the budget, right? We're gonna cut the legal stuff, and soak up our surplus and. Continually work against that amount. Like that's the stuff that I'm thinking about, right? Like, go ahead, Laurie. Sorry, that's you.
I know. Oh, sorry, Bill. I was just gonna respond to Dan, just wondering if you've had these conversations. Is there a number that could be put into the budget as a potential revenue, right? So the voters don't vote on the revenues. Revenues happen. We can adjust the revenues right up until June 30th, and which would lower the tax rate. But if there is some estimate out there of revenue for using the building that would offset some of these costs, it's probably, would be great to get that in there. So I'm just wondering if you have some idea, sort of like Aaron just did to me, like, is there a number? Is there a number that you would have as potential revenue that could be added to this budget?
I think we'd have to have a discussion separate from this.
Uses. But we're there. That's the rub, right? Is that it's preliminary talk, right? So I could throw out a number, sure, and be irresponsible, right, and make assumptions. But that said, like I do not have a firm number, right? I know that there's.
I just wanted to see if you had, then you should add that. So
trust me, I would love to have a number, and that's the rub of this is that what we call another special meeting, and once I have some numbers, I suppose we could do that, right? It's just going to kick the can of being able to vote on this, but if that's what people want, I could definitely get numbers for some of this. I could get numbers for the low-hanging fruit of, like Michael said, the windows, right? Of Efficiency Vermont coming in here, putting a suction, on the front door and figuring out exactly where, our heat dissipates and correcting it, right? Working with Greg and consulting with him. I've already talked to him about, hey, the AOE did this survey and it's great, but Greg knows that building way more, right? And there's other people that have come forward to me and said, hey, I could take a look at the building. I'm a licensed contractor, and I could look through and challenge the maintenance assumption here, right? So yes, the answer is that we're so close to when we close the school that I don't have firm numbers. And
I just, the way you were talking, I thought maybe you had something. So okay.
No, and I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, and but it feeds into the narrative of I would like to explore these options, right? And not just for myself or for the district, but for the community. I think it's important. I think it's important when making assumptions, right, to be as correct as possible. I think the details matter.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Okay, so where are we at with with this discussion? I have a feeling is going to be able to carry on
Probably
for the rest of the night. So, is there any possible action that we are looking at right now? Is this something that what I'm speaking to the board here as far as what you guys are thinking? Because I would like to get into new business and start continuing some of these conversations.
Yeah.
But also this is a very significant portion of the agenda. So
Plus I feel like we've gone through a lot of the other items, but I mean, the only thing I could think of that Lori addressed is like non-technical repair. I mean, I know personally, but the assessment says it like the boiler's in great shape. It's basically new, right? And I mean, at my house, right, we look at it, a year, or 2 years, right? If it's that type of repair, right, then I don't know if it needs to be serviced. Same with cleaning, right? Until we have an understand. I mean, I think that's a great use of surplus, right?
Yeah.
If to clean the building,
If we start to have that, what I'm anticipating in terms of demand, if we start having that utilization, in the next 6 months, we pick back up cleaning. Right, and dip into the surplus. I think that's a fiscally responsible way to use the surplus. To be clear, so I could see a world, same with propane. I could see lopping off that 24K, right, and dipping into the surplus, as needed, as we start to demonstrate exactly what we're proposing.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
So if that change was to be made in the budget, what does that look like? And Lori?
We would also need to agree on
Lori, definitely you.
Yeah. I could work with Greg. I think that is, basically a better way to cut this. Timing wise, I guess you would probably need to have a special meeting then to, get this done in order to maybe even make the May 18th. I'm not sure. Bob said it was pretty tight. It needed to be tonight.
Is there a reason they couldn't adopt a budget with a lower dollar amount tonight and get it on a warning, and then Greg could figure out how to do it later?
Yeah, I think that's perfectly fine. We could say, let's cut $22,000 out of that, out of buildings. And by the time the budget gets in front of it, I will have met with Greg and we'll pull that 22,000 responsibly out of there. And to your point about, not cleaning the building and maybe putting it back in, I don't even think you'd need to use surplus, right? Because if you're thinking about people using the building and paying to use the building, that's going to pay for the cleaning, right? So it would be, a wash there. So,
definitely kind of the thought pattern here that we're trying to go is that we can offset the maintenance, right? Not only lower the assumption on the maintenance, but drive revenue, fees, events, right, to offset that, where like you said, it's net. It's a net zero situation.
So if you were to take, $22,000, right, off of the 579,344, right? 22,000, is that what I said? That would be 557,344. So the board could, vote to put forth that as a budget, and Greg and I would figure out where that $22,000 would come from out of the building maintenance lines.
Okay.
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
So obviously there's a person on the other end of our cleaning. So is there a contract? Do we want to have a discussion with that person or possibly offer them some severance? I don't know if they're expecting to be out of a job, or if we can expect them to pick up in 6 months when we decide we need somebody.
That person is an at-will employee. There's no contract. They get a letter of employment, an hourly rate. So that is a year-to-year decision that the board makes.
Okay. So currently.
So it sounds like it would not.
So he would not be budgeted, but then, then we would have to find somebody to pick up and clean if we get to that point, right?
Which we could do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
People can hopefully clean up after themselves, but.
True.
There's also services out there that, we use from time to time that come in and do cleaning. So it could be another option.
Is that a higher rate?
It's probably higher than, what you're paying, but I think that if you're not doing it every week, it might be, once a month, come in and do a deep clean or something like that. Greg has the contacts for that, so I would want to, confer with him.
I mean, that said, based on the volunteers I think Craig just passed a note that says he would like to do Sally's afternoon. He had to go, but
Craig Bales.
Yeah, Craig Bales. He said that he had to go, but
Helping with after school programs.
Yeah, after school programs. So I could see a world where there's other volunteers that may step up and say, "Yeah, I'll help clean." Let's have a cleaning party, and after an event or what have you. So.
And maybe we could even think about offering a per diem rate to our current employee for the future or something like that.
Yeah.
I know what it costs to get somebody to clean your house. It's not cheap.
No, it's
so
not.
I don't know if that's the rates that you guys are looking at with those services that you said Greg has the information on, but I'd rather keep that money in our community if we can.
Yeah.
And if
for
you're
sure.
open to it, then
definitely
that'd be good.
So you're advocating for keeping cleaning then?
No, I'm not. I'm saying
okay.
that we should still have a discussion with, is it Paul that's cleaning? Yeah, so Paul Wyman, we might want to have a discussion with him and just see if he would be, I guess, per diem or something like that for when we need somebody, given the situation, or if we want to go ahead and just do away with.
Yeah, the Wymans were on here.
So I just want to verify the date real quick. It was May 16th or May 18th?
The revote.
For the revote.
18. I wrote down 18.
18th? Okay.
18th.
Thank
Okay.
you.
It's
Okay.
a Saturday, I believe.
And you had mentioned in order to do that in the appropriate timeline, we would have to make a decision tonight. Is that correct?
That's what I understand.
So we just
Okay.
I think the bottom line is still the same, because either way we could take the money from the surplus or from income.
Yeah, from income. Yeah, that was driven.
So for that, I think bottom line is.
Yeah, and as far as Lori made even the point of the students. Yeah, we need to be really careful about that assumption and make sure that we properly cover ourselves for the amount of students that we're gonna have to tuition.
Mm-hmm.
I have no interest in removing the legal fees, and I especially have no interest in removing that stipend.
Right.
So
I agree.
So yeah, I think it makes sense, lop off 22 and, we'll go there.
Okay.
So what you would be voting on would be $557,344.
Yeah. Can we just make it even 550 somehow? I'm joking.
I sure can.
I'm joking.
So I have, well, it looks like there are 3 people on here. So I'm going to remind all 3 people, we will be the last 3 that we're taking before we probably move into a motion. it's better be about the budget, okay? That's all, that's all I gotta say, because we got more to get to, okay? So we're gonna start off with iPad 2, I think that's you, Tom, is you, or Eileen, was Tom last time? Oh, okay, I see your hand's gone away. Michael Pelton?
Yeah, I just want to point out that you guys could vote on a budget that is lesser. And if Lori finds out that it's, let's say, a few dollars either direction, you can always amend that dollar amount at the town meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael. Either Russ or Joyce?
Yeah, I just wanted to know whether you're going to do it by Australian ballot or in person.
Oh, that's a.
If there's an amendment on the floor, that would be in person, but we didn't discuss that. Can't do an amendment if.
Right, well, I think that's critical in knowing what's going forward.
Thank you, Russ.
I actually don't. I don't disagree with Russ. I've thought about Australian ballot. I think it makes sense. I'm not sure what the procedure is or how we warn it, or maybe Bob, you can help with that.
And does that change our timeline, Bob, if we're doing Australian ballot, and we would then also look at an informational meeting, correct?
You definitely would have an informational meeting, yes. As far as changing the timeline, I don't know. I don't think so. I think you would have to, so you would still vote to adopt the budget number that you have that Lori has given you. And then later in your agenda, when we talk about the articles, that's when I think you would address that issue.
Excellent. Okay, so with that, the budget. Come on back over here, Daniel. So, the number we're looking at, Lori, you said, I believe, $557,344. Correct? With the
Yes, unless Daniel wants it 550 even.
No, I just like tidy numbers.
okay, so I move to pass the budget for $557,344. Can I get a second?
A second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. So we're looking at a budget for that number I've already said twice. Okay, moving on to new business. Principal report.
So you have it attached in your packet from Renee Merluzzi from Townsend. I did not bring her in this time. I figured she was here last time. If there was more questions from the written report, we could bring her in next month.
Do you have that in front of you, Bob? Because I got like a 50-page packet here and.
Yep, it's also linked in there as
Yeah,
well.
my computer is the screen here, so if I go.
Oh, right.
Right.
She's talking about the VIT cap, the state assessments are starting 3rd through 5th grade. She's talking about the team attending the PBIS intensive training, which is the Positive Behavior Intervention Supports team for Townsend, attending a state training. She's talking about grade level meetings this week, where teachers K-8 are hearing about the new literacy curriculum that's being rolled out for next year, EL. She was talking about a Scholastics book fair that happened, a readathon that happened, and she references, I think she might have mentioned this before, I could be wrong, maybe I'm thinking of the West River meeting, but a couple of 5th grade students, I don't know if either of them are from Windham or not, but involving on a math enrichment project with Greg Frost to design and plan a new playground at Townsend School. And so they've been working with Greg to develop the plan, what it's going to look like, which elements of the playground they're going to purchase, where they would go, all that kind of stuff. And then lastly, she references some open positions that they have posted for next year, counselor and a .2 librarian. And that's pretty much it.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And superintendent report.
All right, much like that's attached. Cabinet report is attached in your packet. there's quite a bit in there, 4 pages worth of stuff from the cabinet outlining all the things that they've done. I just want to dig into a little bit about, which is less significant for you guys as a non-operational district, but one of the things that, just sort of started with Windham this year that Windham Central did not have when I arrived, a supervision and evaluation system for principals. And so I am working to develop that using the what they call the PSEL standards, the Professional Standards for Educational Leaders, and creating a rubric for that use for principals to be assessed with. And that's something that will be rolled out for July 1. We are getting into setting up interviews for Lori's replacement for the Director of Finance position. There are 2 SU board members. At the last SU board meeting, there were 2 members that we looked for people who were interested. 2 of them volunteered to serve on that. I think it's one from River Valleys and one from Marlboro. And so they will represent the SU board on that in that endeavor. And then we mentioned that West River passed their budget as well, that you guys are revoting, and that River Valleys will vote at the end of April. So that's where we're at, and that is my report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Excellent. I actually have a question regarding communications that go to families. If the board, it could be included on, if there's communications from the school that are going to families. I was informed there was an incident or something that took place and students had to stay in place or something at the school. And we received 0 communication on that. So I don't know if there's anything you could share with that, if there was something that happened.
There was basically a family situation that had the potential for a parent to come to the school not in a threat. There was no threat made, but it was in a way that was alarming. And so Greg and I both went to the scene just to support the staff there. State police were also called, but not for the purposes of dealing with a threat, but more in the purpose of supporting the other members of the family with a social worker and so on and so forth. There wasn't really an incident. The students were what they called an internal lockdown, if you will. They stayed in their rooms. They still continued to learn. It wasn't like lights off and hiding or anything like that. But it was resolved in, I don't know, an hour and a half, with the family departing and the police departing and everything returning back to normal. But you bring up a great question around the broader perspective around communicating with you folks as a board of students who go there. I know the families received a notification about it, but the board did not. And that's interesting. I guess that's something we'll have to continue to think about. I know, like in River Valleys, the board members want to be included in any communication that goes out from the principals. And so just thinking about how does that translate with a school board sending tuition kids? I don't know. I guess we could talk more about that, but let me ponder that a little bit, because I think you guys certainly, if you're sending tuition money there, you have a right to know what's going on.
Another, not just those types of circumstances, but if there's issues with something's going on at the school, or there's a delay, or there's things that are going on, we are reached out to as a district, and it looks really bad when we have no clue. And so the more we are able to kind of bridge that gap in communication, at least have an idea, I think it's better off for everybody. So anyway.
Yeah, we can do that. I think one of the things you'll have to think about is, next year, if you have kids in multiple schools, how do you, what's the plan there? What's the expectation level? And thinking about that, if you're dealing with multiple districts, multiple SUs, private schools, public schools, who knows? So that's something you'll have to think about what you're hoping to get at that point. But as far as the rest of this year goes, I can certainly ask to have your 3 board emails added to a communication plan so that you guys will get stuff from Townsend specifically.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Any other questions for Bob? Crystal, I see your hand up.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute.
That's okay.
Not a question for Bob. So just wanted to touch base on the Scholastic Book Fair. It was a great success. The kids loved it. We raised almost $6,000, and 2,000 of that actually goes back to the school library. So the kids get to help with picking books for their own school library.
That's great.
That's great.
Wonderful.
That's awesome.
Oh, thank you for sharing, Crystal. Any other questions for Bob, and then we can move on to the residency policy if not? Seeing no hands in here. Okay, moving on to the residency policy. Anything else, Bob, before I move on from you?
Nope, I can talk about the residency policy though, if you'd like.
That would be wonderful. Go right ahead.
All right, so one of the things that I talked to last time with you guys, as districts are non-operational in some places, depending on the nature of what is being operated or not. Some districts have taken upon themselves to get pretty active with determining how to determine residency, so that you're not spending tuition money to places that aren't justified. And Stratton, as a classic example, with a K-12 non-operation, and lots of condos and other types of second homes, people had begun to abuse their generosity around tuitioning students. They had to really come up with this extensive plan. Because you guys are still tied to West River for your secondary, I don't know that you would get the same thing quite the same way for elementary, but it's good to have something in place. So this is basically this. So I looked for something that was more in the middle, and so this draft that I shared with you is very similar to the one that River Valley's district uses. Again, they operate lower and don't operate the upper, so they have to have residency for the upper grades, but it's not quite as detailed as a Stratton policy. So anyways, it was just a draft of something for you guys to look at. In fact, I can see right now that I missed changing Dover and Wardsboro in one place to Windham residency, the bottom of the first page. But it would, if you wanted to consider something like this could be a first reading, and you could bring it up again for a possible adoption at a later date if you chose to go in that direction. So it is not a required policy by law. And it's just one that a lot of places have to develop a system for determining whether or not someone lives in your town in order to get tuition money.
Yeah.
Access to tuition.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I've read through it, and I think straddles the line of like not being too punitive, but also covering us.
All right.
In a pretty logical way. I mean,
would you like to make a motion?
I think we should motion to. I would like to make a motion to approve the policy of verification of student residency, contingent on typographical errors being fixed.
So moved.
Again, so you're basically doing this as a reading. You would actually warn it for adoption for next time, and then you would adopt it.
Perfect.
Is that a motion for reading or adoption at a later time?
I think you could motion to make the changes as designated, and then we'll bring it back for adoption after.
Motion to make changes. Done.
Okay. Sounds great.
So I second your motion.
Thank you.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All right. Building discussion. Here we go, folks. So future use, proposed research. So we can start off with there. So Daniel, I know you've done quite a bit of research on some stuff, so go ahead and.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's been covered, right? But I think that more pressing on my mind that we haven't really got to is like a list of legal questions, right? Like, what does the deed say, right? How are we insured, right? If we have plans outside of, say, educational use, like that's stuff that I do not know. Mm-hmm. And I think that in certain cases, I mean, it's something I talked to.
Russ, please mute yourself. Thank you.
It's something I talked to Bob about, but I think it makes sense for some of them. Would probably make more sense for Sean and Bisbit, given the connection with it being locked in with insurance. And some of them for Mark.
Yeah.
But another thought came up actually as we were going through the meeting is that I think it also makes sense to have that meeting with the select board
Yes.
and to work on the list together of exactly what do we need to know, because there's a lot of hypotheticals and there's a lot of, I think this is the way it is, you know?
Yeah.
So I think what I would like to do is get that list together. I have it together, but start narrowing it down. Let's get with the select board and then let's continue narrowing it down, because I could see a world where billable hours are way too much, right? Based on this, and we could probably knock out some like low hanging fruit without, having bill backs from Sean and Mark.
Yep. Perfect. I know I had some questions regarding security and how that would fold into potential future use.
Sure.
So I would like to request to have access to whatever the security is here, so that, and I know that's not typical, but I would like to be able to start seeing what the system has. I have a lot of experience in working with security, so I do realize the different types of systems and what their capabilities are. And depending on how things develop, at least we can have some insight as to, is that system appropriate? Do we need to adjust that system? So I'm not sure, Bob, how that goes about, but I would like to be given access to that.
Yeah, and just to add to that quickly, I've received feedback of people, say, outside of the board, kind of poking around.
Mm-hmm.
And it's definitely a concern of mine that if we don't have access, that we really get record that type of stuff.
And establishing any type of safety protocols for the future building use really needs to establish on what that looks like and what access we have. So that's something that in order to develop those things, those parameters really need to be looked at and figured out and understood so that the future plans can be developed.
So as currently situated, the security system, the camera system that I think is what you're referring to, security can be broader. There's no alarm. So you're talking about camera system.
Yeah.
The camera system is tied in with our whole SU into one system. So with multiple cameras and accessible only through a secure server system set up at the IT office at Leland Gray.
Is it possible to offer to do permissions on certain cameras that way, because we don't want to see other districts?
And that is generally
right. Well, that's certainly a privacy issue. I would have to talk with IT to figure out how they could do that. It might be that they'd have to remove your building from that particular system, and you'd have to figure out a new server and a new setup. I'm not exactly sure how that works.
Generally, it's how the authority's assigned. So generally, they would say you'd only have access to the certain section. But so I guess I would motion to direct the superintendent to talk with IT and get clarification around what steps are necessary to make that happen. Can I get a second?
I'd also like in that motion for Greg to be a part of.
I believe he does, yes, and I would love to have Greg because I think I'm gonna have to pick his brain on a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So definitely, but as far as the access goes.
I see.
Hold on, before you finish your motion, so you're looking to be very clear on what you're looking for in the motion. You're directing me to work with IT to find out what's possible, or you're looking for me to work with IT
of the board,
set up a board member with access to it? What specifically are you motioning?
Well, one, you're saying you have to find out, but the direction is, this is our building. We need to have this piece to address future development of what's going on with security, which is a pretty important thing. So not sure what that is, but just want to make it very clear that you're being directed to figure that out and get the access. So that's
what's the outcome, Abby? Is the outcome that there is an account for the board chair to have access to see the cameras? Is that what you're saying?
Well, not only that, but it's
have
something.
Access to the security system, Bob. Yes.
Well, Bob, the other thing that we kind of talked to Greg about offline was, say, like recording an archive, right? Like, do we have access? Like, is that automatically downloaded to somewhere? Like, do we have access to like that type of?
It'll all be a learning process too, and I'm sure once the access is there, then it will unfold a whole bunch of more questions as to like how does it work, right? Because
I get that. What I'm asking is because it's set up to a login. So are you designating it to the chair, to a person, to the whole board? What are you looking to get out of this? I want to be.
I know I would like it if you guys would like access as well. I'm not like gonna go no. I mean, if you. want to be able to know
Right.
that, but
If it's as simple as,
Yeah,
if you add one,
then we
three,
could see,
why
and
not?
if it, yeah, I mean, I think it would be great to
I don't
start
want to overburden.
with one, and then if it's decided that there's a need, then we can maybe address it later, but have worked out the kinks on how to get somebody added first. So maybe one person to start, and then if it needs to grow, adjust it there, or.
I do want to, speaking of burden, he mentioned that it could be a contingency that they have to boot up more servers, right? Like take us off this system, right? Because they can't individually assign
Right, so
cameras.
they could share that information with us, Bob, so that we know what's clear and what that means.
Yeah, I just don't want additional,
cost.
speaking of,
Right.
budget constraints,
So-
I don't want to take, it's not that important of an issue quite
Right.
yet.
You're looking to not incur additional costs. You're looking to see if it's possible to take an account, set it up, designate the Windham cameras specifically for that account, and then potentially add additional viewers to that later, is what you're asking for.
Yes.
Essentially, it's not to withdraw Wyndham from whatever access you guys have. It's not trying to say we don't want however you guys are doing stuff. It's that in order to fully understand what this system can do, to have that access, if possible, which it should be. And if not, I would just really ask a really clear explanation as to why that wouldn't be, because we're going to have to consider what those options look like for us, again, with future use. So it shouldn't be, if it's something that is going to be a large cost, then yes, we're going to need to know that, but it's likely not as challenging as probably folks are thinking it's going to be. Maybe I'm wrong, but it doesn't seem like it's a huge complex system. So it may be in the bigger picture, but if we're looking at just, and IT would have a much better understanding of this, just this school and just access to this building, that would make a big difference in knowing how we're going to be implementing that if necessary with future use.
Gotcha. All right. So go ahead and make your motion. I understand what you're looking for, and we'll go from there for sure.
All right, all those in favor?
Second.
Second, aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you, Bob. So any other future use discussion of the building? Do we want to move on to current use?
No, I think it makes sense.
Okay, curb.
I'm sorry, hold on. Let me, can I go back to your future use? I heard Dan reference talking with an attorney. Did you make a motion about that? Are you directing me to do something with that? What's your?
Yeah, essentially what I'm saying is that there's a huge list of questions that we have in terms of like the legality of use of the building, right, and everything around it. I'd like to sort those out, but I think it's a conversation with the select board as well, because I would like to narrow that list down. And then depending on the question, I think certain questions make sense for Sean and Bisbit, and some of them make sense for the board's attorney.
So at this point, you're not directing me to do anything with any attorneys?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. I just know what my role is coming out of it. That's all.
No, you're all
You're
cool.
doing great.
All right, in current use, so develop protocols. So there's, when we had kind of hinted to that before, where people were suggesting that maybe we had been meeting, I think we were just excited to get here because we can't do all those things and talk about what we would like to do. And I know there was conversations about potentially us being able to spend some time in the building and maybe develop some type of a schedule. So now that we're here, I'm assuming that that's probably the same for folks, that you guys are still on that idea of spending time and developing that.
Yeah.
Has anybody given thoughts to days and times and what that would look like and what's best for them, so we could set a schedule, and this way the public can be informed and people can know when they can come to the building, right? Like, are there days
Well,
and times?
so we should probably clarify this a little bit. So having somebody in the building doesn't necessarily mean that's only when they can come, correct? They can request ahead of time for, if there's an evening, something they want to do in the evening or something like that. I mean, you can't expect.
We would have to approve it
Right.
to have it be used, and in the evening, somebody must be in the building, which is why I had mentioned way back hiring somebody. But if we are going to be, we either delegate and give somebody the approval. So say it's Craig and Sally as an example that are going
That's
to do
a
after
wonderful
school,
example, yeah.
after school thing, right?
Yeah.
We can have a discussion and say we're comfortable with Sally and Craig having a key, they can be responsible and have a clear set of expectations of what, everything's secure when they're done. So yes, that can happen. But we can't just open it up to the public and leave. We can't be like, okay, the building's gonna be open on Monday from, 8 to 2.
But that's not what I'm asking. What I'm asking is for, in terms of how people access the building by request. So if we have somebody sitting here, 3 days a week or a day a week or something like that, obviously somebody can come in and say, hey, I'd like to discuss possible building use on this day for this reason. And, there's somebody there to discuss it with. But if they want to, maybe they can't make it up that day in time to request building use for whatever they want to use the building for. I think that there should also be a way to do it online or through email or something that just everybody knows this is how you do it if you don't want to go to the building on that day. Not saying that we're not going to be there when the event is happening or,
right
for that, but just the first step of how do people request that? I think
Yeah, but so I think we're talking about parallel paths, right?
Okay.
Like, okay, we have,
right, need to probably be discussed together.
Yeah, like maybe, each of us has like a day and a time slot, as well as they can, if someone wants to use it, right? And keep in mind, our building policy is not just towards Windhamites, right? It's
Right.
towards the, the wider, group of towns and et cetera. I think it makes sense if there's one-offs, outside those times, email us and ahead of time, like a week ahead of time or something like that.
And we can develop, I think, as we're able to begin creating some times where people can expect the building to be open and then we're here, or however that works, that we can start, we're gonna have an experience as to how the building uses, we're building these discussions. How is it being used? How is the flow? What complications and things do we come up with and deal with when we're in the building? And that will lead down to further discussion, but also planning, right? So we'll be able to know, okay, let's just say we're gonna pick 2 days and one day Daniel's here, another day I'm here. And somebody comes in, they say, hey, next month I wanna be able to use this. Well, we might need to consider getting a calendar or something that, because we can't have people double booking and so it's gonna need to get organized, right? You don't want to have somebody say, I'm gonna
But
come in
that I
and.
think is independent of having somebody physically sitting in the building.
Correct.
I guess, are you supportive of say, like taking a day in the time slot?
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I
Okay.
think people still need to be able to send an email or to fill out a form, or there's gotta be some kind of channel that they don't need to drive up here to talk to somebody on they can't just.
And
I think that would be really important for it to be an accessible option for people.
And as we create that availability, I think we're gonna see more of and hear more from people who are showing up to use the building. So that would then, like we had mentioned, yoga. So is somebody gonna come in and say, you know what, I really wanna do yoga on all these, these specific days and times. So then we know those specific days and times are dedicated to that and we have that added to an agenda and talk about it, So I think that there's ways to do that and we'll obtain that data. But in the meantime, I'm really excited about being able to offer that and to get it started. Is that?
And to your, I like the idea of the form.
Yeah.
So I could set up something, that MS Forms, set something simple, with the understanding that, whomever it is, it needs to be, needs to be at least like a week in advance or something.
Right.
Like you can't do it 3 days prior and then be like, why isn't the board,
Well, we lost B, but I think that once we are able to get that set up, we can totally put that on the town website.
Okay.
So then-
B is the person that is
She
managing that?
is
Okay.
a rock star, yes.
Oh, interesting.
So.
That is great to
Which
know.
I just remembered, B, and if you watch this recording, I forgot to send you the agenda for this meeting, so I don't think that got on the town website, my bad. But I've been trying to email that to her.
Was she on my mailing list?
I just had no, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that's just, I think, while we're here, right, let's get days and times that are we're comfortable with. What days were you looking at per day or?
Monday, Thursday, Friday. I could do a couple hours prior to like 5 or something like that. So like say like a 2 to 4 block or a 1 to.
So you said Monday, Tuesdays, and Fridays?
Yeah, sometimes, sometime after 10, but before 5, I'm comfortable with, a couple hours.
So, but do you want all three, or are we
No,
thinking
just
like,
one.
okay, just one of
Just
those?
one,
Okay.
one of those 3 days.
So how many days a week do we want somebody in the building, or just?
I think it'd be reasonable to probably, if it will work, to get 2 days a week at least, for it to be available for folks. We've got, as you guys know, lots of people interested in how they could be using the space, so starting to get that kind of momentum going is not a bad thing. So with that, let me see, I just lost my spot here. So Monday, Tuesday, Friday, and you're saying to start with a 2-hour slot?
Monday, Thursday, Friday.
Thursday, Friday,
Yeah.
okay. So,
Anywhere from 10 to 5, a couple hours. Yeah.
so I can also, on Mondays and Fridays, if we wanna do,
I could do Wednesday.
yeah, cause I could do anything on Wednesdays. Wednesdays are a really tough day
I'll
for
do
me.
Wednesday then.
So if we have Monday, Thursday, Friday, do we want to do just 2 days and like we each take a 2-hour slot, or do we want to do, if you can't do the other days and you want to do Wednesdays, how much time would you be looking at doing to? I mean, it's nothing right now, so even if you give 2 hours, it's better. It's better than it not
that's
being
kind of what I'm
available.
thinking is like,
You know.
like just a 2-hour slot. Let's start slow and build from there. And each member does a day.
It says a day. Okay.
Yeah.
So how
Does that
about
work?
Yeah, so we would be committed to a time slot every week. So it would
Yes.
be 3 days a week then, in theory, if we do 3 separate days.
Yeah.
we each would have one? Yep.
Yep.
So
And we post it. Let's get the word out. Let's say I'll send a board email.
Alternatively, a thought
Sure.
is if we did keep 2 days a week and there's 3 of us, that way we have a rotation where not, if you're going away or 2 of us are going away at the same time, we're not
That
tied
could
to,
Yeah.
maybe.
And one person has a day off or a
Yeah.
week off or something like that to make it a little easier on us.
I think that sounds reasonable.
I
If
like
you guys
that.
think that's.
I like that.
So now
Yeah.
to also try out different timelines, I know we're saying 2-hour slots, so we want to do like Monday 10 to noon,
Can we do 11 to 1?
11 to 1 on Monday. And then I can do,
Well, but then if Roy can only do Wednesdays, then
I can do other days. but
Okay.
Wednesday would be best for me.
okay.
I mean, Monday, Wednesday, Friday works if you want to come in on a Wednesday. So
Great.
we'll do, what time on Wednesday for you?
11. I could do any time between like 11 and 5. But let's say, could we do 12 to 2 or something?
12 to 2. Okay. And then Friday, I can do,
At the same time, so what do you think?
I know. That'd be easier if we weren't a quorum, if we could talk.
yeah, I know. This has been ideas that we've had, but clearly it's not something we can collaborate on. So we're here to
Well,
collaborate, and I appreciate you guys' patience through this. So,
Well, so technically speaking, right, like open meeting law, and visibility to the public, we're talking about scheduling right now.
right.
Is there any reason why we couldn't take it offline and then announce the results?
Yeah, I was just hoping to make it clear in the meeting and then have it be set. So,
I
but
see.
we can, that's all. Because I just wanted to, we have an opportunity to let the community know we're looking at these days, these times. And then, yes, we'll put something out to Ellen to blast and also probably on the town website so that it's known that it's available in those days and times, which will eventually change and adapt depending on the needs. So,
Okay.
I'm thinking I'll do 11 to 1 on Friday, and we'll just do this for next week. Woo! Please stay muted, folks. Thank you. So Monday 11 to 1, Daniel.
So we're doing 3 days.
Wednesday 12 to 2,
That's what I'm
Rory,
hearing. So-
and Friday 11 to 1,
So,
Abby.
Yeah, except for that I'm away in like 2 weeks.
That's okay. It may change by then. So just for next week, we have this
Okay.
schedule going, and we'll figure it out because the week after that, we may say, nobody came and maybe we should try something earlier, maybe we should try something later. But just to get something out there and make the public aware that this is something we want to be doing, and we will be trying to adjust scheduling and be as transparent as we can on when the building will be available.
Okay, so how do we announce this, right?
Yeah, yeah,
how do we tell people? Is it Ellen? Is it
Everyone.
Put a
So-
posting on the door?
Yes,
posting on
so there's a select board meeting on Monday.
Okay.
I try to attend those if my crew is not too chaotic. So I will be, Tom, I don't want to have to tell you to stay muted. Please stay muted. Thank you. So we can get it out, get it on the town website, get it out in email, and we'll update it accordingly. And so we're just
All right.
being good. Does that
Do
sound
you
good?
want to spearhead kind of the marketing here?
Yeah, and I'll mention it on Monday at the select board meeting.
But, and I can put it in a school board update.
Yep.
And then,
news and notes. Oh yeah, the news and notes school board update. Is that-
well, I could do both. I could send out my mailing list, but also
In news
put
and
it-
notes, I would say
Put it in
to
news and
check
notes.
the website, town website for
I see,
availability
just in case it
versus specific
changes.
times,
Yeah.
because we're gonna be flexible with that. I think
Okay.
it's fair.
And then you'll reach out to B to
Get that all
Okay.
on there. Does
So
that
to get
sound
that on
reasonable?
there. Yeah.
Go team. Okay, so we'll get all that communicated in a much better way.
Okay.
But just
Um,
when I'm not here, though.
Yeah, we'll
We'll get you figured out. It's okay.
yeah. I mean, and we can build a calendar.
I think we should have a calendar somewhere. 'Cause
Is that
I think going on the fly every week is going to be tough for the people that want to come
Right.
to know where.
Right.
yeah.
So we'll the
Totally.
first week that we work out some kinks and figure out what's going on and go from there. So
Can we can B put a calendar up possibly?
yes.
Okay. That has just the times, and then we can adjust, like if Rory's out of town, if
Yeah.
I'm out of town.
I think that's reasonable.
Like I'll be out of town for the week of 6/3 through 6/7.
Yeah, we'll get it figured out.
Okay.
So no worries there. I'm excited and I appreciate you guys wanting to do that too. So that's awesome. So
Yeah, so the only thing for current use, if you're willing
Yeah,
to,
go
or
ahead.
if you want to move on, the only thing for current use is assuming that we get a green light for folks that want to rent, say, a room or
Yep.
the auditorium or et cetera, right, on a regular basis.
Mhm.
We would need to figure out rental, like
Mhm.
agreement.
and Bob did send us the SBA agreement. If I believe you did. You sent that to everybody, Bob, correct?
Wasn't there something that we got from
Waiver, you guys have the waivers, are we talking about?
Yeah,
the waiver, but the rental, if we were to rent? That might
Yeah,
be,
we had some model procedures that Greg had shared with you guys way back, yeah.
South Burlington, I think.
Okay, so we have that.
So, well, and yeah, I guess we should probably, before we cross the line of actually renting and what that looks like, we would have more conversations, but
Yeah, you would
clearly
need
we
to,
could.
you need to adopt some kind of procedure there that would have rates, because if you're talking
Yes.
about revenue generation, you'd want to have some rates generated to do that.
Yep.
Meet costs.
So that'll be for further discussion.
Okay, but at least we have groundwork on it, and if we get to that conversation, right, and
Yeah.
getting approval, right, in terms of that, but before we sign, let's firm up the document, bounce it off of probably Sean, but maybe Mark, and then adopt it.
So
I
this
guess
may
at a
be
meeting.
just a trial period where we're in the building for discussion or for people to come and use it
Yeah.
before we establish these the rates going for future use.
Yes.
Is that
Yeah.
what you're saying? Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
So we'll be able to have connections with people and their various ideas and what that's gonna look like. So yeah, so when we get this out there, please come in and stop in if you're available.
Yeah, tell your friends. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now the
The space
closure
is
vote. 16 VSA statute 5637.
I have a bunch of hands just FYI. Sorry.
Nope, that's all right. Yes, Bob?
Well, did you want me to jump in, or are you doing some people from the audience first, or what are you doing?
That's a good question. Yeah.
So I guess we can take some people from the audience first, and I apologize. I'm writing them down. Okay, so Pat, we'll start with you. Go ahead, Pat McLean.
What's that? Instruction.
You're muted, Pat.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry, just trying to do that. Yeah, I have two questions. One had to do with the security of the building you talked about, and I'm really kind of at a loss. Is not the district monitoring the building? And aren't they providing, or could they not provide a report to the school board?
That's not what I was requesting, but I appreciate what you're saying, and it is monitored through the SU. But I want the board to be able to have access as we will be discussing future building use and how does that play into those discussions. So we need to know more about it.
But is it your intention to monitor the building?
No.
You to monitor the building?
No.
I'm just very unclear about that.
Okay, I apologize. No, it is not to take over the responsibility of monitoring. It is to understand the system itself and be able to learn more about the system, and by having access and actually utilizing the system to see what it does. It's not just getting a report from somebody. It's going to be very different depending on what the use of the building turns into. So.
Okay, and my second question is, are you still considering taking action on the petition? Is that still on your agenda?
What's that petition?
What petition are you talking about?
The petition for private school.
This has been a proactive move by the board. So
Okay.
yeah.
But when was that done?
I mean, I added it to the agenda when it was brought to my attention that there are statutes that we'll get to that, but essentially there are statutes that the school board may elect for tuition to independent schools. My intention for that, I mean, we're gonna get into that pretty soon in our agenda.
Okay.
But my intention that is that we should be proactive about that, and there's no reason that those families shouldn't be brought into the fold. They've been too long out of the fold, and I don't see any reason to deny their tuition. But we'll get to that. It'll be a discussion amongst the board. And back to the security cameras, it's not about like having a security state or anything, Pat. It's just, we've heard, just correspondence about, this person or that person, right? Just kind of poking around, right? And so we would like to visually see that. It hasn't come from the SU, not to throw shade to the SU or something, but we basically, as we get more sophisticated, right, with our hours, with perhaps like rentals, right, to different parts of the building, it makes sense that we would have access to that security and be able to pull down that information without having to go through the game of telephone with the SU IT. Does that make sense?
Well, I see this as a very temporary period of time until the community has opportunity to really engage and make decisions about where we go from here. But I'm more concerned now that we're really paying close attention to the families and the kids, and that they'll be all set for starting school in the fall. That's a real concern. That's all. Thank you.
But what's the concern there? I'm sorry.
That we focus more on the steps that need to be taken in order for things to move forward for the kids to transition to school. I think that should be really a major focus now, since we're still in a little bit of limbo.
Oh, and totally. I mean, we have agenda items towards that. We have it baked into our budget to tuition, where On Deck is talking about bringing more kids into the fold. So it in no way does that preclude, right? Having this item preclude focusing on the children. In no way is that, what our intention. We're still focused on the children, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, no
Thank
problem.
you, Pat. Crystal, go ahead, and then Michael Pelton.
I apologize. It's probably not the point of the meeting to ask this, but I was reminded when Daniel mentioned the deed. Back a couple months ago, there was talk about the paperwork needed to be provided to Lori to say when the school was established. I don't recall that ever being discussed again. Was that
Lori, you want to hear
provided?
the good news?
Yeah. That
I won.
the Nimer's over there.
Oh, okay. So then that's all done and you're all set.
Just as of yesterday, Crystal, it really was a long process, but Michael Pelton provided that deed, and that with the letter from the state and me begging them to push this through, we got it done. So we can accept federal grants now. So.
Yeah. And that's the only reason you don't see it on the agenda or it noted, is because it
happened yesterday.
Yeah, it happened so close.
Nope. I was just reminded when you said deed, so it's fine.
Cool.
Thank you, Crystal. Michael Pelton.
Yeah, I was thinking about you're talking about use on the building. I really would encourage the board when they're thinking about community use for the building that they do not charge a fee for anyone who would like to use the building for educational purposes. However, I would encourage the board to contemplate some sort of fee structure for, rental for other purposes, to ensure that if we're going to keep the building under the school board's purview, that there's some revenue generated. I did a sort of super quick, rough calculation, and it looks like using the $46,000 or $48,000 number, although you've trimmed it down to 20, but using that $48,000 number, it's like $131 a day, basically, to operate the building as a whole. So if somebody wants to rent it, maybe that's sort of the start of the fee structure that you contemplate.
Undercut.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot goes into that. Like, we'd have to figure out like what is fair market for rent, for a day or two or whatever it is, right? But yeah, I understand. Yeah, we need to kind of like do backwards math towards like the maintenance and see like, okay, like how can we offset it? I'm also thinking about other ways of offsetting the maintenance, not just. I don't see, at least in immediate, rental being the full way to offset the rental, offset the maintenance. But yeah, I agree that needs to be a part of the equation. Thanks, Michael.
Okay.
Yep, no problem. Nobody gives a shit about the meeting.
I'm sorry.
Wow. Okay. Please no cursing on the board meeting.
Yeah, reminder
next
about...
time I hear language like that, you will be removed from the meeting. Thank you. Moving on to the closure vote.
Bob, do you want to kind of...
Yeah, so this sort of came to me in a different pathway. I think after the initial petition that was sent that you guys put on the ballot, or not on the ballot, but you put on the agenda, the warning for town meeting that was approved about tuitioning students. There were people who believed that there were several other logical steps that came after. I was not thinking in that way. It had no, I mean, again, apologies for being in my first year, but it wasn't thinking through what those implications were. But I did poke around a little bit and got some folks at the state to try to weigh in a little bit on like, what does it mean to vote to tuition your students? Like, what does that do? Like, what it doesn't, it didn't close a building. It doesn't officially do certain things. It just basically does this one thing. But the AOE doesn't allow for the tuitioning of students and the operation of a building simultaneously. So I was pointed at a statute which has to do with, I think it's the 563(7) powers. This is powers of school boards. And you might remember the statute because you guys utilized this, one part of it for the sound administration of the school district element, which allowed you to temporarily close without having the electorate vote on it back in December. It's the same statute, powers of school boards. But further down, under number 7, it talks about relocating or discontinuing use of a schoolhouse or facility subject to the provisions of 821 and 822, which are the tuitioning ones. And so basically, it sounds like, from what I can understand, the logical step for a board to take after agreeing to tuition students, as you have done, would be to, subsequent to that, is to utilize this statute and to vote to discontinue the use of the schoolhouse as a school. Now, it doesn't mean anything about what you do with the building. It doesn't change that. It just discontinues the use of the building as a schoolhouse. Because once that happens, the next piece, this is sort of a two-step process, using VSA 821D, which is a separate part of 821, allows you that now that you've voted to close it, you can read the statute under D, you do not maintain an elementary school. Now you can grant general authority to the school board to pay tuition. The voters may grant authority to you guys to pay tuition for elementary student at approved independent schools. So it's sort of a funny dance, and it was not something that maybe we didn't anticipate at the board level or the superintendent's level. But it's been pointed out to me that this is the logical next couple of steps. So I brought Dan, I talked about this when we discussed and planned the agenda. I walked him through a little bit of what it looks like. Basically, if you held a vote, like in your board meeting, to vote to close the school, because that one falls under your authority. And then you put an article in front of the electorate, because this 821D requires a vote of the electorate. At the same time, you were voting on the budget to consider the use of expanding your tuition to independent schools. You kind of do this sort of as a little 1-2 step. And then you come out of it with the ability to not only continue tuitioning to the public schools, but to independent schools as well. And I'm going to get to this a little caveat at the end that I just want to flush out with you guys. And as Dan knows, we've talked a little about this too, the going rate, if you will, for the independent schools is usually set by, or you can set it to be by the average tuition amount in the state average, which in some cases might actually even save you some money. Lori can give you a little bit more information about that, but I've shared that number, I think, with all of you, but maybe just Dan, with what that state average is. So it's kind of I just wanted to talk you through that part. I'm happy to try to answer any questions you have about it. The little sort of the caveat, if you will, is at the bottom of that statute, the second one I mentioned. It talks about that once the electorate votes, they can vote to grant authority to you guys to pay tuition for elementary student at an approved independent elementary school or at an independent school meeting education quality standards pursuant to sections 823 and 820 of this chapter. So basically, you can limit the type of independent school it goes to. If you choose to want it to have to meet education quality standards, which are the governing rules for public schools in Vermont, you could designate as such, or you don't have to. You can just say approved independent elementary schools, and that would be any school that's approved by the State Board of Ed. So there's two different ways you could word your article there to put it to the voters. And I wanted you to understand both those options. But in essence, what you would do tonight, when you have to approve your articles for your vote, for your budget vote, you would also add an article. You would vote today to close the building, and then you would add an article for the voters to give you the authority to include the independent schools in whichever mechanism you wanted to choose. And then on that May 18th date, you could potentially pass a budget, expand who can go where, and possibly save a little bit of money on the side. Again, Lori can speak to that, because some of these, the state average might be less than what the tuition is to some of the other regional districts. So I don't know if that was a lot. I threw it all at you at once.
What do you got for questions?
Oh, give me a second.
Yeah, so the article for independent school tuition, we talked about, and I know what Emily's question is. Me and Bridget talked about this. So what would it take for that to cover, because you mentioned like educational standards, what would that take to recognize, say, like Mountain School?
I don't know which independent schools follow EQS and which ones don't. If you want to ensure that you had the broadest coverage on the article, you would let me find my article here. You would basically, the part that I have in yellow, you would not include that. That's why there's a big or in the brackets there. You would basically cut that out and then adopt the article, or warn the article for a vote at on the floor at your meeting. So first half interpretation would give you the broadest. If you did the or instead of the first part, then you'd be narrowing it to schools that that do follow EQS, and I can't tell you which schools those are. I don't have any idea.
And I'm curious about the statewide tuition. We'd have to also specify within the article statewide tuition, like matching up to statewide tuition or something like that.
I'm gonna ask Lori if she could speak to that part. I think there are boards that set a cap. It might be a separate article. Lori, you can speak to that. You've been doing this a lot longer than me.
So, for example, River Valleys uses the Burton tuition rate. That's the cap that they set for any independent private schools. So they won't pay anything more than that. So, I mean, they've had kids in Switzerland, right? But they're only going to send $19,036 to that program, and the parents need to pick up the rest. The public tuition is the public tuition, right? That's, you know, what you need to pay. But that is something that you would need to establish, that you would, you know, either use the statewide average as the tuition payment to the private schools, or it could be a number that you come up with.
And Lori, should that be a separate article? Can they include that in the same article?
I'm sorry. So River Valleys does have a separate article every year where they set the tuition rate for the private independent schools.
But if we just, like, if we said statewide average, I mean, that would cover us every year, right? And it would just be a calculation based on the statewide.
That's correct.
That
right.
way we don't have to go through the same thing every time.
Yeah, you could just say the statewide average, because that's a known number. So,
yeah. I think, you know, if we were to go this route, I think it makes a lot of sense just to set it to the statewide average.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
Can I offer a point of information?
Let's wait for the chair, Nancy, if you don't mind.
I'm digging through my stuff here. So,
Do you want to call on some folks? There's been people pass, or yeah, but Nancy is definitely on
in the queue.
Well, yeah.
Okay,
But,
so
but I
Emily,
think it was like Emily, then Russ,
and Aaron, and then
Nancy.
Nancy.
I think.
Okay, thank
Something
you.
like that.
Emily, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. So I sent an email to the board just earlier today, and I just wanted to really highlight for everyone exactly what that means. So while going through the agenda, I see the highlighted section under adding independent schools. We need to have it corrected to say school board and pay tuition for an elementary school at an approved independent elementary school. We need to omit adding quality standards because there are basically no independent elementary schools in Vermont that adhere to the EQS standard. The standards that are different at independent schools. So adding the highlighted section in it doesn't benefit any children in Windham and any independent school around us, such as like the Putney Grammar School, the Mountain School, the Maple Street School, the Red Fox Day School, do not allow the EQS standards.
Yeah.
The only two schools in the state in Vermont that follow those are the Thetford Academy and Sharon, and both of which are high schools up north. So to add a broad section for Windham, we need to make sure this is presented properly for the town to vote on.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Emily. I think being as, you know, kind of what me and Bob were talking about is keeping it broad but also, making sure that we don't have to rewarn this every time, and it's just set to the statewide average. I agree with your point, definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
And I did want to ask Bob for some clarification, because back when we had initially made the decision under statute 821 of Title 16, there was conversation I remember having between C and D. And here we are revisiting D, and seems to be under some different parameters than there were before. So if you can maybe explain why we went through that.
Well, earlier, I think when that came up before, it was under the auspices of families asking for tuition to be paid out while you were still operating. I think that's the key difference to what we're talking about now.
And it was
because right now, under
Exactly, but we're at a different point, but it still stands that we may elect, right?
Okay.
That they were using sound education or whatever the verbiage is.
And now because that, even though there was litigation and other stuff, now the wording has to be because the school is closed? Where it wasn't
Well, we can't
before?
We can't warn this without the school closure, right? To submit. I mean, and it's the same for public, right? Like I think both.
We agreed to tuition students to Townsend Elementary School, and we denied families of independent schools. And that was back then. So I'm just curious as why now we are looking at this article, which was brought up for discussion with the attorney back when we had to make this decision, and why the wording is now that the school must be closed, or the building must be closed, when we tuitioned the students and the decision was made to not include D, and we only focused on D.
So I'm happy to try to answer that if you guys let me finish.
Yes.
Thank you. So the action that you took to close the school was from 563, subsection 2, right? May take any action as required for the sound administration of the school district. And the action you were taking was to temporarily close your school due to staffing and temporarily pay tuition to a nearby public school. That action had to be, if you recall, had to be basically approved by the Secretary of Education, right?
Yeah.
And as such, we had to be narrowly defining it, and so at that point, the school wasn't officially permanently closed, and so you couldn't access the private funds on that because the agreement you had with the Secretary of Education was that you were following public, and that's how the Secretary agreed to it. Now that your populace has voted to allow you to pay tuition to public schools, if you vote to close your school, which is step 2, I guess. Step 1 you already did back at town meeting. Step 2, once you've closed your school, now when you go back to 821, A doesn't apply anymore because you're not operating a school. So now C and D can apply, and D is the part that references if you're not maintaining an elementary school, now you can also have the electorate grant you the authority to pay to independence. So that's why it was like a 3-step process.
Gotcha.
Clearly thought out by people who were writing the petition to you guys and getting the votes, but it wasn't spelled out to us at the board level or at the supers level what those 3 steps were or the logic behind it, which is fine. It's just the way it played out. But here we are. Those next steps would grant you the ability to allow those families to now access private school. And again, if those people are paying money, not only are you saving money in what the tuition cost would be, but now those ADM counts come back to you.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. I had next in queue. Sorry, guys, I didn't forget about you. Russ?
Go ahead.
Bob is 100% correct. There's a 2 or 3 step process. Once you have closed the school, then according to statutes, you can add independent schools. And my recommendation would be to further that language and say, allow approved independent schools domestically, and for the tuition rate to be the average of the kindergarten to sixth grade tuition levels. The reason I'm saying domestic is if someone wanted to send their child to a school in Switzerland, they could ask for the $18,300 to offset that tuition. But if you put the words domestically, it means within the United States. And they could even send them over to Vermont Academy over there in Pulteney or Putney, wherever that is, if they wanted to. But it would be critical to specify the amount and that it to be domestically. Thank you.
But what's your opposition to international? But what would it matter to you? And I don't get that point.
The reason I think it limited to domestic schools is so you don't have abuse. I mean, there were people that might move into town simply so they could send their kids to a school in Canada or Australia or something else and collect money. We want them to be here, educated here in Vermont.
I mean, if I
Okay.
mean, this is kind of
Thank you, Russ.
Yeah, sure.
Aaron Kehoe.
Yeah, I think, the best thing is what, somewhat with what Emily says, but approved independent schools not meeting the Vermont standards. I think that opens up a much wider variety. Now having a child in our household that does have school choice, which has been very confusing for the rest of the children. So like Burr and Burton, we had to pay an additional $4,700 on top of that. So I think adding the state tuition average is a key part where if somebody does want to send them to another school, it doesn't impact the budget for people wanting to go to Burn, even though we're talking about educational for, K through 6 right now, but it could elaborate somewhere else or, expand. So I think the average state tuition should be added in there. So parents who do want to send their child to another school in Connecticut doesn't pay the extra, and we're only paying the average state tuition.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I appreciate the comments, but we've definitely outlined that the educational standards, right, are too strict for some of the independents, and that the statewide average is what we would use. So yeah, I agree. I'm not sure
Thank you,
how
Aaron.
else to add to that.
Okay, I don't see anyone.
If you would like me to share my screen, I have tried to capture that in the wording of this, just so you could look at it if you want.
Sure.
Sure.
Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Let me make it a little bit bigger, probably, right?
That'd be helpful.
Yeah.
So, and I think I don't know how Abby has her set up, if you move it to speaker view instead of gallery, you'll get it even bigger. But either way, so the green is what I've added since the conversation has gone on. The yellow I've left there because I heard it doesn't sound like you want to go that direction, but I just left it there for now. So the shall the votes of Windham School District grant general authority to the school board to pay tuition. And this is all straight from the statute, this part. For an elementary student at an approved independent elementary school, and this is the word I've added my own words, utilizing the Agency of Education's announced statewide average tuition rate for elementary school as the tuition payment cap.
Sounds right.
I agree with the wording.
And then we'll get rid of.
Yeah, and then remove the or. Yeah.
So you'd have to explain that to the voters at the town meeting, why it's so wordy and what it actually means, and why you took out the or whatever. But that would be my suggestion, but you can modify that obviously at your will.
Do we need to bounce it up a Sean or anything?
Well, I mean, I don't think so, because the bulk of it is coming from the statute, and the second part of it is just laying out a cap. I think it's fairly straightforward. You could, if you want. One of the things that, again, tonight, the hope was that if you guys are adopting a budget and adopting warnings, which would include a date and a time for the meeting, we could get it warned and get the show on the road, if you will. Taking time to run it again with this new version by an attorney and everything. Again, you could, but now you got to have a special meeting to formally adopt a new article and rewarn it. You know what I mean? So like, there's a little bit of a time lapse in doing such. But again, it's up to you.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Nancy, your hand was up before, and then Michael Pelton. So go ahead, Nancy.
The statute actually said, I'm not sure that the thing that you just put in, it will work, because what the statute says is, the tuition paid to an approved independent elementary school shall not exceed the least of 1, the average announced tuition of Vermont Union Elementary Schools, which is what you just said to put in there. 2, the tuition charged by the approved independent school for the year. It can't exceed what the school is charging. And 3, the average per pupil tuition the district pays for its other resident elementary students in the year in which the student is enrolled in the approved independent school. So I'm not sure that you actually, A, need to put in that additional clause, and B, whether or not it's legal, because the law already says it has to be the lowest of those three possibilities. And this is 823, section 823, elementary tuition of whatever, the Title 16, Chapter 21, Section 823, or whatever I just said. Yeah, Section
823. Yep, you're correct.
I mean, Bob, like, let's just bounce this off of Sean to be sure, right? Like,
no, I actually think she's right. And I think, Lori, the reason that River Valley puts a different number specifically is that it might exceed.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
when I'm thinking
about tuition bills that come in, I mean, if an independent school only charges $14,000, then that's all they charge, and that's all that River Valleys or Stratton or whoever pays.
yeah, it's up
But
to.
the cap is saying, right, that so we don't pay the statewide average if the tuition cost is less.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're not gonna. There's not a windfall there, right?
Right. So I guess, I mean, I thought the wording was okay and encompass that because it was up to, right?
Exactly.
So it's never going to be more than that. But if the independent school charges less, then that's what they bill and that's what's paid.
Yeah, so it sounds like, yeah, so this added thing we just added doesn't break the law. It sort of underlines and stamps on the law, but it doesn't break it. Yeah.
Yeah,
so
so
we can take it out because the law clearly is already in place, I guess is what she was saying, which makes sense.
The other problem with adding it is it's got to be it said what the law says is it shall not exceed the least of. So were the average per pupil tuition the district pays for the other kids, were that average less, then you couldn't pay more than that. So that's why I think you should leave it out. Basically, the law already tells you what you have to do. So you can't cap it. I mean, legally, you can't cap it.
So thank you for bringing that to our attention, Nancy. And I agree with Daniel, Bob. We should probably run that by Sean.
yeah,
So we'll just make sure and we'll get that taken care of.
none of us are lawyers. Like,
So-
we're reading statutes.
Yep,
and
we'll interpret
trying to
that correctly and move on from there. Michael Pelton.
Yeah.
I just want to say that I support the addition of an article to tuition students to independent schools. I think it should be broad and encompassing and allow as many students that are parents and students, I should say, that want to participate. Our town has a long history of supporting education. And I think we should continue that. I think it's ironic that we are looking to expand and make sure that we are encouraging and allowing as many people to participate in education, including independent schools, regardless of their qualifications. Yet, on the other hand, we are concerned about spending $5,000 on a stipend. I just think that's really ironic that we're worried about the $5,000, but we're looking like, hey, let's see how many kids we can add onto there. Like, I think it's good that we're adding kids, but I think it's funny that we're squabbling over nickels and dimes. That's all I got to say. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
And just if I could offer some clarity about what EQS actually covers, just because that's was one of the points of conversation. Things like teacher licensure requirements would be something that EQS would require. And so if an independent school is not following EQS, what that means is that they do not require teachers to be licensed by the state of Vermont. So that's one example of something that would be not following EQS.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of irony here, but okay. Abby's not there, or she's in the bathroom. But Russ, go ahead.
I just wanted to make a comment that we need to look at section 16.821 and items 823, 23, and 28, because the parents are supposed to notify the school board by April 15th to the next, before the next academic year as to where their kids want to go. I think at some point along the way, you ought to extend that to April 30th or even May 15th. Following up on what's happened at this evening's meeting, the parents need to be able to make some choices and submit their requests in writing to the school board. It would clarify a lot of issues. Joyce has a comment as well.
Hi, I just want to offer some feedback to Michael Pelton's last comment about squabbling over a few $1,000s while we're allowing students, the tuition option. And I just want to make it clear that for years, we've always heard that without our local elementary school, the town was going to die. There would be no one moving into town. The town was simply going to die. And tonight I heard Lori Garland.
Point of order. I'm sorry, this meeting is going a little bit longer than we need to. We are discussing the article, and that is the closure vote. So I'm cutting you off there, Joyce. I'm sorry. We're going to move along.
Real quick. Russ, you mentioned 2 articles. It was 823, and what was it? Did you say 815? I just want to write down. Okay.
Maybe they left.
Okay. So,
well, we need to bounce this off of actual lawyers that understand these statutes. We're all laymen when it comes to reading legal documents. We can sit here and equivocate and act like we know what we're talking about, but at the end of the day, we need an actual lawyer to rubber stamp this and say, yes, this is the proper way to do this. Yeah. Otherwise, we're just guessing and just opening ourselves to risk.
So we're looking at right now where we're at in the agenda, approving the articles, discussion, and all that stuff. So the articles, we've made the decision. We're going to have the attorney take a look at.
Yeah.
Get some clarification and making sure that the wording is appropriate. And then I believe we've covered the agenda. I do want to highlight going forward. Hold on, Bob. We will be, I think it's going to be really important going forward that in these meetings, one of the board members is the host. So I'm not sure how that's going to look, Bob, going forward, but I just want to make that very clear.
Bob did recently give me Zoom Pro access.
Oh, lovely.
Yep.
So going forward, can we agree you will be the host?
And we talked about this actually. And
I want to be clear with people, profanity at no point in time will be allowed in this meeting. Not. And if I hear it ever, you're gone. I'm not that's unacceptable and inappropriate.
Nor dredging up like personal history or background of who he said, she said. That is no place here.
We've got a lot to work on. We are dedicated to getting as much information to you guys as possible, hearing input and doing everything we can. Clearly it is, almost 7:45. And we are still here in this meeting. So on that note, I will make a motion. Oh, Bob, you had one more thing. Go ahead, Bob.
I got a couple things. One, you didn't vote on the closure piece.
Yeah, we need to close.
So that if you're going to do that to move to step 2, you have to do that. And I just want to be clear, if you're not moving forward on the other piece and we're setting up an attorney, that's great. We will need to set a special meeting relatively quickly once we hear back from the attorney to approve the articles, which will include the budget article, potentially this independent school article. And the other two, one of them was the Operational Reserve Fund. And
All four. Yep.
all of those. And the other thing I wanted to mention in this is that I believe, and I can look into this more in the meantime, but I don't believe you can just automatically go to an Australian ballot for the budget. I think the townspeople have to vote to go to Australian in an article. And then the next time it comes around, then you could go to an Australian. I'm gonna double check that, but that's how I'm reading the statute. So you could have an article on this one to move future budget votes to Australian ballot, but I don't think you can actually have an Australian ballot on this particular article at your next vote. But I can find that out for sure, but that's my gut based on the read of the law as I'm sitting here.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So we're gonna, I know you mentioned the closure vote, but we can do that in the special meeting when we approve the articles. There's nothing that's gonna be any different between now and then.
So you're not approving any articles.
Or we're waiting for the attorney, right? So when we do that special meeting, we'll make that vote then. So I make a motion to adjourn.
You look at the ramifications of actually doing the closure vote?
Yes. Yeah, in the meantime, we'll do a little more research.
But hold on. Again, you guys so you're saying yes, but who's doing that? Am I doing that? Are you talking to Mark? What's the process here? Because I want to be super clear when I leave. I know exactly what I'm doing.
We had said that you would talk to Sean to get clarification on the articles and the wording.
Yeah, but not about the closure vote. So do we need someone should Sean look into the ramifications of a closure vote? And guys, I know you have questions, but we're at 7:40 and it's starting to get a little personal in some of the comments.
Left. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I know, right? So
well, my thought is that
Russ, you'll be called on.
That we're getting clarification. I think that the closure vote, that's not necessarily a Sean question. I think we can, that's going to come up with the articles. We can definitely dig into that and I think on our own figure out some stuff.
Closure vote, just to be clear, the closure vote is your vote. That's not an article. That's something you have to vote on as a board.
Clear, but we're going to be dealing with a special meeting already to deal with the articles, so we're going to have to address it at that time anyway. Right?
Are you asking me to do any research about that? I guess
about the closure vote? No,
is.
just specifically the articles. Would that be fair?
Yeah. So do you want to take that task?
I certainly happily will take that task.
Okay,
so.
It's gonna be a week to find out everything and have a special meeting.
Exactly. Then we'll assumingly let's closure vote and then
have
the exact wording that we need. Yeah, and just
and
approve all the articles.
Hopefully a quick meeting.
And then go to God. I hope so.
Okay. Anything else, Bob?
That's it for me. Just want to know what my role is.
Move to adjourn at.
Hey guys, since Michael interrupted, I think it's cool that I do it. I want to let you know that the schools
No.
asking,
Point of order. Point of order.
No,
meeting is adjourned. It is 17:42.
No, you have to be called by the chair. Thank you.
All in favor? Aye.
So now the kids have